Welcome to another episode, everybody. Today I'll be joined here with a fellow associate of mine, Super Antonio Bro.
Hello.
Now, today's episode is going to be another special one because this time we're going to be talking about Spider-Man. All sorts of things related to Spider-Man. I mean, he does whatever Spider can, and so on and so forth. So why don't we talk about him in honor of his 60th birthday? Now, a lot of people just talk about the movies and stuff, or how Spectacular Spider-Man is the best show ever, or how the 90s series was the precursor to the MCU. But, like, it's already been there, done that, so I think, why don't we just talk about all sorts of Spider-Man things? We'll first be talking about our history with the character, and then we'll be talking about, like, what we know about him from the comic books, what we think about his many TV shows, the plentiful of video games he's been in, and conclude with the movie side of things, because save the best for last in a way, because that's all people ever talk about with Spider-Man. But, with all that said, let's begin. We'll start with you first, Antonio. So what was your history with Spider-Man like?
Well, I first heard about Spider-Man, the third movie, and this was around the time when the movie recently released on DVD, and the movie was the first movie that I pretty much ever watched, and I want to get more into stuff later about the movies, but to basically put it short, as a kid, you're just there for the action. But when you grow older, you understand more. That's why, for me, when I was a kid, the first time I ever saw this, I was just very shocked with how awesome everything was. And then there was the all the coloring book, that Scott Johnson's Spider-Man art, and I started knowing more about this character, and I was starting to like really appreciate. I was like, wow, Spider-Man, this guy's amazing. And the more and more I started seeing him, the more I got into him, and the more I was shown about him. And wow. Everything going from seeing Amazing Spider-Man on opening day to then seeing Amazing Spider-Man 2, revisiting the trilogy, then watching the Ultimate Spider-Man show, and then going to most recently seeing No Way Home. Like lots of things I've been through with this character. Some highs, some lows, but the point I was still growing more and more attached to this character, and I love the fact that he was made to be relatable from Stan Lee, and that's what I really find it beautiful about this character. He's supposed to be relatable, and I've yet to be more related with Peter Parker since I'm still in high school, in my senior year. But I guess it's still relatable to some extent. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I want to save most of the stuff until I get to more of the shows and the movies. So yeah.
All right. Regarding my history of Spider-Man, I honestly don't know how he got into the series, but I do know for a fact that it was for the first movie. Maybe it's because, as a kid, I always felt that, some movies might be a little too boring, or I can't take them seriously. I was like 3 or 4 years old when the first movie first came out, and the fact that the movie itself felt like it was something that anyone can watch got my interest, because I saw it cheaper by the dozen. I thought it was okay, but I didn't know much about it. It didn't really grab my attention. I mean, I was a kid after all. But when I saw like the trailer for Spider-Man I think it was a commercial, or I might have gotten it on VHS after that, because I didn't see the movie in theaters. I wish I did though. However, though, I did get to see the movie, and my love for the character was huge, because he was the coolest guy I've ever seen. Up until then, my interests were stuff like SpongeBob, Toy Story, Barney. So I didn't know much about all that sort of superhero stuff. But Spider-Man was the first character that I knew that was a superhero that I was attached to a lot, because he had a cool outfit. He had my favorite colors, red and blue. He can shoot webs, he can swing around New York City, he can climb walls, he has spider sense, he's super quick with his reflexes, and he's also the kind of guy that shows that you don't have to be like a super muscular man to be a superhero, because he's a fairly young looking guy, but you can still take him seriously. Amusingly enough, he kind of reminded me of Steve from Blue's Clues, and it's kind of amusing that both of them got to show up around the same time last year. Apart from that, though, it's just great to learn about Spider-Man, and since then I got some merchandise. I got Spider-Man themed costume, pajamas. I still have some old Spider-Man curtains that are in the basement, as well as an old Spider-Man plush from the second movie. There was also I owned the first VHS copy. I don't know why, I don't know where it is, but I used to own a bootleg copy of the second movie. Now that doesn't matter anymore because I have the original trilogy on DVD, which is great. And it's also great to have actually seen lots of cartoons, get some coloring books, as you mentioned. The Scott Campbell artwork, as you mentioned before, was fantastic. Yeah, it's just a beautiful thing about Spider-Man is that, as a kid you just think he's so cool, but now you just feel more respectful of him because he's not just a character you can relate to, but he's also the kind of character that feels like he's got universal appeal. Plus, as a kid, I always thought that, a character having man in their name just felt awesome. It kind of was already there with Pac-Man, who I was also a fan of back when the first movie came out as well. And there's also the fact that there's people like Superman, Batman, Aquaman, Iron Man. It's just a cool thing, honestly. Iceman. Just the fact that you put man as part of your superhero name just makes it pretty, it just makes it sound awesome to me. It is, though. However, there can't be Spider-Man without comic books, so why don't we talk about the history of Spider-Man in comic book history? Not all of it, though, because there's so much to explore. I mean, granted, not as much as, say, Superman and Batman, because those guys have been around in the 1930s. So, let's talk about what we do know about Spider-Man. His origin story, obviously. It was with Amazing Fantasy 15 that gave us the likes of the origin for the hero. How we got to know about him. It felt like he was a character we can understand right away. Especially with that iconic comic book cover that has been replicated to this day. Plenty of times, it's a well-homaged comic book cover that, I think, symbolizes who Spider-Man is.
What people would first think when they see the cover, they would go, oh, so who is this guy? Is he trying to save them? Is he trying to negotiate with them? What's up with that? And I think that would definitely catch the reader's eye, and then they will soon learn about who this character is. Goes through the whole backstory of Peter Parker, and then to the tragedy of Uncle Ben, and then the lines of with great power there must also come great responsibility. I'd say readers would be expecting action. While yes, they do get some of that, they also learn about just the whole thing about the fact that there's consequences to some actions, and that's what makes Spider-Man a really good character, and it shows what it is being a hero. Your actions have consequences, no matter what you do. And to quote this from someone, even if you make the right choice, even if you make the wrong choice, there are still consequences to his actions. And the action that Peter did was that he didn't stop the robbery, and the consequence of that is that Uncle Ben died. And so at that point, that would tell people that, make the right choice. Don't just leave anything that might be bad by itself. You should definitely stand up for something if you know you can do it.
And of course, the iconic saying, with great power comes great responsibility. Or must also come great responsibility, you're that sort of nerd. However, why stop there? Because there are plenty of things that Spider-Man has been through throughout the many, many years of his comic book history. Admittedly, most of them involved initially fighting against some normal crooks and thugs, but I think it's safe to assume that Spider-Man's adventures are noteworthy because there are plenty of things that have changed over the years beyond just introducing a new villain. I mean, what kind of villains do you think of when it comes to Spider-Man? In terms of the one that stands out to you the most? For me, it's gotta be the Green Goblin, because, he's just a perfect opposite for Spider-Man. Opposite colors, opposite personality, opposite powers, and just, even opposite, roles that they have in their identities. One's a fairly youthful guy trying to make the most out of his current days in school, and the other one's a businessman or a philanthropist, if you will, that is in a way connected to Peter Parker, even if it's more so with Harry in general.
For me, I'd say those villains, like you said, it would be Green Goblin, but there's also the others, there's Doc Ock, there's Venom, who is very popular, there's Scorpion, there's Electro, there's the Lizard, and then you have the more obscure ones, but are still pretty much well known, and even some making debuts, not debuts, more like comebacks in the PS4 game, like Mr. Negative, who I'd never heard of before, and he's honestly really cool. There's also, Kingpin. There's also Tombstone, and yeah, Spidey has a whole arsenal of villains that he could go up against at any day. And of course, there is the team up, the Sinister Six, which obviously varies from what I'm being told. But the point is that Spider-Man has villains that have a different story, and they're supposed to be, the perfect nemesis for Spidey.
Yep. But of course, the comic books are where it all begins, especially when it comes to the guy that made his first appearance as the first main villain for Spider-Man. And you guess what it is?
No, I think I can.
Well, people can pretty much think of the more iconic guys like Spidey, for Spider-Man, like Doc Ock or Green Goblin, but the Chameleon was the first guy to pop up. And I think it makes kind of sense too, because they wanted to showcase just how different they can make different sorts of thugs turn out. And the Chameleon was a great way to showcase the fact that Spider-Man's going to have a lot of different types of foes to face off against. Some of varying degrees of power, but the Chameleon is the kind of guy you'd probably expect the least. I mean, the first time I've heard about him was from a Leapfrog game for the Leapster. Remember when they used to do that sort of thing back then? I think they still do it now, but I remember that Spider-Man had a fake clone that was trying to frame him for putting a stop sign that's misspelled, because of course they would. But the Chameleon himself was a kind of character that kind of gets set aside nowadays because he hasn't been in any sort of mainstream media, but yeah, he is the first villain we get. But for more significant villains, however, people will definitely look into the Green Goblin, because in the comic books, he is not only connected to a friend of Harry, like Peter's in the form of Harry, but he's also been the kind of guy that is involved with stuff like you know, like killing Gwen Stacy. Green Goblin did that sort of thing, and it pretty much sets the bar high for Spider-Man stories, because but nowadays, like, the problem is the fact that comic books just go for the sort of thing like, oh, this character has this sort of preferred description, or oh no, like this person is like trying to say something about how political correct things are. Whereas back then, the main idea was, hey, let's make stories interesting. Let's make the night Gwen Stacy died. Comic book movies take a lot of inspiration from that, as well as cartoons and all sorts of other things, but like, it was kind of bold to see that it's somewhat of a side character that's actually connected to Peter for the most part gets written out like that. And the fact that it also led to like the last stand for the Green Goblin before he was killed was like shocking, because some people, Spider-Man might be seen as like a rated E for everyone type of guy, but it also proves that he has some darker moments as well. As well as the fact that at one point he wanted to give up his identity. Spider-Man. I mean, you probably already know the story of like Spider-Man just giving up his costume.
Yes, I do, and you know, there's also the Spider-Man story where it takes place after Civil War. That Peter pretty much makes the devil, and then who is Mephisto, and gives up his marriage with Mary Jane, so that way, you know, his identity would be restored. I'd say that was kind of infamous for back in the day.
But what was also infamous was the fact that years later, after going through many sorts of villains and dealing with stuff like the laws of Gwen Stacy, and even having different sorts of like affairs with the likes of Mary Jane Watson and Black Cat, he at one point got himself the controversial black suit, which nowadays is pretty popular with fans, but back then was controversial to an extent, because people saw that it was supposed to be like the regular suit was supposed to be a bit of like a way to rival Superman and Batman's outfits, because they were fairly similar. And the fact that he was with it for so long just made it seem like they were just trying to like show away stuff like that. But it turns out that the symbiote was an alien, and after all the sort of stuff he dealt with the Secret Wars, you'd think that he'd be able to like handle the suit no problem, but no, it actually messed him up. And like after rejecting it at one point, after discovering it was an alien, like you would think that it would be over for that sort of story, but no, in fact, like, it comes back to him. And it's also kind of like where we get to see what will happen next, because in a way, like, you could probably say that the symbiote itself would actually become popular, but more so thanks to a certain character attached to it. But before then, we had to do with stuff like a wedding, which is best known for having a real-life mock wedding take place in the 1980s, late 1980s, in fact. Although some people probably like find it a bit stupid that they got married. But like, what do you know? Like, what can we do? Earth 616 is a long-going story arc, but it's one of those things about it. But you might know best the Clone Saga, which is not particularly well remembered or loved, for that matter, just because people thought, oh no, this guy's like the real Spider-Man or whatever. It's just something stupid. But it got a little bit better, like much better, I'd say, once we got to, you know, Ben Reilly having his own identity, Scarlet Spider. Although the fact that he was the original and Parker was a clone is just like stupid as shit. What do you think?
Well, I had never really read the Clone Saga, but I do know that Scarlet Spider, or Ben Reilly as I just like to call him, yeah, it did. He did gain the popularity, and honestly, his suit is honestly really nice. You know, It's just a red, red whole suit with a ripped up jacket, and it has the spider logo on it, of course. However, it's a little bit slanted, going up, slanted, almost like it's crawling up him. And I honestly really like that. I won't lie. He also has, on his little bracelets, the just plain white eyes. It really looks nice. I won't lie.
And during all this stuff, Spider-Man also got to encounter the ever-popular Venom, who is undoubtedly one of the most perfect ways to represent another kind of opposite, because while we can't say the Green Goblin is the perfect opposite for Spider-Man, Venom is the perfect antithesis for Spider-Man, if that makes sense, because he's much more twisted and psychotic in appearance. I wouldn't say psychotic, he just looks like a monster Spider-Man, but it's a way of representing just how evil the symbiote can be, especially bonded with somebody that already hates Spidey. Like, Eddie Brock is the perfect way to represent another kind of opposite for Peter, in terms of he's like an evil Peter Parker that was trying to make another clone. Because, while we can't say that Green Goblin is the perfect rival for Spider-Man, Venom is like the perfect mirror for Spider-Man, a darker mirror. But it's crazy to look into the 90s when it comes to stuff like Venom, Scarlet Spider, the death of the fact that Mary Jane Watson's unborn daughter got killed by the now revived Green Goblin, and all the other crazy stuff. And then we get to the 2000s with more crossovers along with the New Avengers, and then the Civil War stuff as mentioned before. And then there's even the notorious One More Day with Joe Quesada, as I like to call him, Joe Quesadilla. It's just one stupid thing about comic writers, that sometimes they just go back and forth on what to do. But hey, it's great to hear that Peter Parker gets to work at stuff like Daily Bugle or work as a teacher, and it's just amusing to see some of the other stuff that happens, including Norman Osborn at one point being part of the Dark Avengers as Iron Patriot, which you may think is best known for being in the MCU as another version of War Machine, but initially that sort of idea was used on the former identity of the Green Goblin. I bet that blew your mind.
Yeah,
But apart from all this stuff, I think it's the 2010s where things get a little complicated, because not only does Venom at one point separate himself from the real Eddie Brock or the normal Eddie Brock identity, but we also get ourselves Anti-Venom, which is the new form Venom has for Eddie. Meanwhile, the symbiote itself instead bonds with Flash Thompson, and all the way back and during all this sort of stuff before all this nonsense happened. Well, I say nonsense, although Anti-Venom and Agent Venom are cool. We got Carnage and numerous other symbiotes that were crazy in all sorts of colors in some extent. But I think the one story that people hated the most, apart from One More Day, was the Superior Spider-Man story arc, where at one point Doc Ock and Peter Parker switched minds after Peter Parker was dying, and he said he wanted to be Peter's life, and he became the Superior Spider-Man. But he failed all this sort of stuff and allowed Peter Parker to get his body back. And now Peter Parker now becomes part of a new story arc, I guess. Parker Industries. I know this is Starker, but Parker, Stark. Yeah, the new stuff from Marvel I'm just not familiar with as much. It's just kind of hard to keep track with. But this is what happens when you do Earth 616 as an ongoing story arc. Now you see why I prefer when Transformers reboots every once in a while. So, now we talked about Earth 616. What do you think of the Ultimate Comics?
Yes, the Ultimate Comics. Now I know that this is the universe where you know, like a few, couple, you know, maybe tens, I don't know, comics later, Spidey dies from Green Goblin, and soon Miles Morales takes his place as Spider-Man. But before that, you know, there was the Ultimate Universe where almost every Marvel character received an ultimate version of themselves. And aside from Spider-Man, lots of the characters that got it were pretty different from their versions. I won't say what because I can't remember the specifics, but basically all the Ultimate characters, they were very different from their 616 counterparts. But for Spidey, I'd say it was kind of similar. However, I'd say that Peter was much more younger around this time as Spider-Man.
That's right.
And another thing that the comics brought us, these kinds of comics, was the artwork. And Ultimate Spider-Man's artwork, I'd say before Scott Johnson's, this was used a lot. And I'm not gonna lie, this was used a lot for some of the popsicles, some gift sets like pencils and notebooks. Like this guy was pretty much the older brother of or the father of Scott Johnson's Spider-Man artwork to be on merchandise.
I think it made more sense to say precursor.
Ah, yes, of course.
Because I think by that point, that art style was retired after we got ourselves the Scott Johnson artwork. But yeah, he was only everywhere, but I'd say he was the least altered of the Ultimate Marvel heroes. I mean, Iron Man's suit design was different, Captain America was more PTSD-ish, I guess, compared to his R616 counterpart was more noble. Hulk was cannibalistic after taking the blood sample of Captain America to try and make himself much less aggressive. But of course, being the Marvel Universe, that doesn't work out as well. Then we have ourselves the fact that Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are apparently trying to do an incest couple thing, which is stupid because they're siblings. And yeah, like, now you can see why people prefer Ultimate Spider-Man's comics more than anyone else's. I mean, like, can you really blame me if you were to, like, can you really blame them if they prefer, like, a more straightforward story that isn't trying to change things up for the hell of it than they would, a story that evolved around Tony Stark and Scarlett Johansson's sex tape being leaked?
Yeah.
But apart from all that sort of stuff, we have ourselves a much younger Peter Parker. He looks more like the kind of guy you'd find in the 2000s, whereas Earth 616, Peter Parker's more classic. And I think that's for the better because it kind of showcases just how different Ultimate Universe is, being much more modern, much more fresh, much easier to get compared to Earth 616. The villains, however, where things get a little different. You know, some are like fairly straightforward, like Doc Ock and Venom, who in this universe is actually much more prone to relying on eating people so it can survive. Whereas Earth 616 Venom, he was alright. He didn't have to eat anybody unless he wanted to. Then, of course, we get stuff like Green Goblin, who is very different. Obviously, we know him best for just being a green, like, Party City Goblin guy. In the Ultimate Comics, he was much more of a hulking monster with pyrotechnic powers, let's put it that way. He's a pyromaniac. And of course, you might know him best for popping up in the Marvel Legends Infinite series back in 2014 with a tie-in to the Amazing Spider-Man 2, including figures like Amazing Spider-Man from the second movie, as well as Electro. Oh yeah, and also Electro is different in this universe as well. I think, like, it's been a long time since I saw it, but I'm pretty sure that inspiration of Electro was used for the cartoon as well as the Amazing Spider-Man 2, because I think that's the appearance that they went with for a good while before we went to the more traditional look. They'd probably fine, although now I'm thinking about it, I remember him having his face blown off to try and replicate the iconic Electro mask. So yeah, Ultimate Marvel is just very different from regular Marvel, but it's kind of amusing that it got attention for the mainstream media the moment they said Peter Parker died and we got Miles Morales. And you can tell just how people were going to react to that. What was your reaction?
For what again?
The death of Peter Parker and his replacement being Miles Morales.
Yes. So now I first heard about Miles Morales through a book fair at my old school, and it was the first comic book issue that he appeared in, where he actually became Spider-Man. And I thought to myself, wow, this is amazing. There's a new Spider-Man. And I started reading it, and I got to know more about the Ultimate Spider-Man. And honestly, I think that was a very great decision for this version of Spider-Man to die, and then bringing in the first African American Spider-Man, while also being a mix, since his parents his mom being Hispanic. And yeah, honestly, I love it very much.
When I first heard the news, I thought to myself, whoa, damn, they actually killed Spider-Man? And that's kind of bold. And then discovered it's Miles Morales, and I'm like, oh, this guy doesn't seem too bad. Then I remember, wait a second, like, this is Ultimate Spider-Man. And like, Earth 616 Spider-Man's still alive, although he would die, actually, with the Superior Spider-Man story arc. But yeah, like, compared to a lot of stuff that Marvel tries to do nowadays, this is how you introduce a new character that may seem like it's just a race-bent version of an already existing white character. Now, I know some people don't like race-bent stuff, or whitewashing, or when they try to make something that's more politically correct, but I think that Miles Morales is the perfect way to do it, because he's not there to, he doesn't really like being a replacement for a character that has made such an impact. Like, with War Machine, he's his own guy. He's more than just like a Black Iron Man. But, like, you can already tell he's already, like, at the same level as Tony Stark was, for the most part. Because I know for a fact Tony Stark had, like, drinking problems in Earth 616. Whereas a lot of other media at least tries to, like, put them both together at the same time, right away. With Miles, though, he just feels a little more reluctant to try and take up this new identity because his life is different from Peter's. He's much happier, and the fact that he has his burden weighed onto him, he doesn't know how to explain it to others, just seems a bit, like, stressful for him. And that's why I rooted for him, because I wanted him to succeed. And it's great to see that other Spider-Man media has capitalized on Miles Morales. Especially stuff like putting him in Earth 616, putting him into video games, especially the Insomniac series, which we'll get to, and Spider-Verse, which we'll also get to, because, my god, that's such a beautiful movie. And if you don't agree with me on why Miles Morales is great, I think it's safe to agree that he is much better than the new Warriors that were put out in 2020. I mean, really? Snowflake, Safe Space, and the fact that the designs look like something you'd find from, like, Tumblr art style, it's just a fucking joke. But Miles Morales is no joke. I take him seriously. And I love him as much as I love Peter. Anything else you have to say about the comics, beyond those two?
No. Nothing left.
Peter Parker's definitely been in a lot of sort of, like, crossover story arcs. You probably might have seen him take on the likes of Juggernaut. Chances are you might have seen him at least once go up against someone like Batman. But he's definitely been with a lot of other Marvel superheroes. And I remember one of the memories I saw was him being held captive by the Fantastic Four back when they were prominent in the Marvel Universe, which was pretty cool to see, especially since, like, I kind of have a soft spot for older Marvel compared to the current stuff they do nowadays. But we'll get to that in a bit, I think, as always. So, a lot of comic book stuff to go over, a lot of crossovers. Definitely great to see stuff like Spider-Man 2099, who, even before Spider-Verse was already popular thanks to his unique design and his well-made writing. And the fact that we get a new identity, that being like Miguel O'Hara, who is able to try and take influence of Spider-Man and go up against the corrupt regulations that are going on in 2099. Although I will say, why the fuck did Hasbro call him Miguel O'Shea in his first Marvel Legends release is beyond me. Spider-Man Noir is another cool addition, especially considering the fact that he's made in the Great Depression era, and he even lost someone to, like, he even lost Uncle Ben from reportedly from the Vulture, was much more cannibalistic. So the fact that we get a somewhat, not just darker, but also somewhat more unique steampunk era Spidey is like a massive W if you ask me. And of course you get numerous stories with likes of Venom, what if Gwen Stacy got the Spider, and that's how we got the likes of Spider-Gwen, although it could be a little bit different depending on what version it is. It's just insane to look back on the history of Spider-Man comics. There's just so much to look into, and it feels like there's not enough time, especially if we got other things to do. So why don't we just talk about the TV shows instead?
Nice.
So, the first ever Spider-Man TV show was made back in 1967. It is, how do we say it lightly? It's kind of bad. But the one thing I will give it praise for is giving us the iconic theme song. I mean, like, Spider-Man does whatever Spider can. Is he, like, you know what it is like. It's right there. He spins web any size, catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes a Spider-Man. Like, it's iconic. It's Spider-Man. Like, it's a song that gets to the point, and it's catchy as hell. Let's be real here. The original, like, TV show is kind of crap. Which sounds mean, yes, but let's be real. But, like, let's just, like, talk about it right away. It's definitely a much simpler TV show. Like, you probably know it best for the memes, right?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
I will say that in a time period where you usually got ourselves like a lot of Hanna-Barbera shows with the same character designs and animations, I'll give them credit for going for a more realistic sort of look. Which is hard to say because it's still comic book influenced, but at least like the character designs look more real in a sense. Like they're more proportionate. They look like proper characters. Like Flintstones and Jetsons have their own unique character designs from the Hanna-Barbera era. So to see Spider-Man have his like own like proper design and whatnot in animated form was cool. And the animation is alright, I guess. Some of it wasn't too bad. It wasn't choppy. The lip movement was okay. I like the fact that Peter's eyes do move. Like, I wouldn't say move, rather squint whenever he's trying to express something. That's a great way of showcasing like expression without trying to make his face too animated. Although, how his lenses would animate in a real-world situation before Civil War is beyond me. But it works. It makes sense. The way everything else was handled, I mean, yeah, like, Daily Bugle was faithful, Peter Parker was faithful. The origin story was kind of cool to see because they actually would showcase something like death happen. Even though the rest of the series is fairly campy. I mean, not Batman campy, but still campy. But people know it best for just how absurd some stuff is. Spider-Man being rolled up, Spider-Man in a barrel, Spider-Man like laying like a French girl, Spider-Man sitting in an office with his own portrait, Spider-Man trying to put his mask on, or Peter Parker reading a book that's been used for meme templates. But the one thing I remembered now was the fact that certain characters aren't really that accurate. Like the Green Goblin in this version was more of like a normal like fantasy goblin, whereas the actual Green Goblin is actually a philanthropist man, Harry, like Norman Osborn, and he's much more obsessed with using technology. I mean, yes, he has like the Goblin theme to him, but he isn't a full-on Goblin. That makes sense. And of course, I remember the fact that, like, when I first looked back into the story arc regarding Magneto, I thought, oh, cool, they have Magneto. Then I remember, oh wait, this is like early Marvel TV show days. Magneto would be treated as a joke. He was in the Fantastic Four series, but not being a proper mutant, but he looked like Magneto. And in the 1967 Spider-Man show, like, they have Magneto, yes, but he's not even Magneto. Like, he's just Albert Einstein named as Magneto. I mean, I'm not sure how big of an X-Men fan you are, but the thing about Magneto is the fact that he's best known for being a power-hungry mutant that loves to, like, treat humans like shit, especially after being a victim of the Holocaust. Obviously, they're not going to put that sort of stuff in, but Magneto's an already established character in the Marvel Universe. So why they went with this sort of, like, approach with just making Magneto an Albert Einstein-looking guy with no mention of his mutant origins or his Holocaust days is beyond me. Not that they need to do the latter part, but, I mean, come on, he's a mutant. He's from the X-Men series. That's how you treat him? Still, I don't know if it's actually worse than losing to a wooden gun that Mr. Fantastic made. Jesus Christ, these older Marvel shows are weird. And you know what's even weirder? Apparently the budget for Season 2 was limited. So they had Peter Parker take on some similar animation to what happened with Robin Hood from another TV show that was made by the same company. And I think they also recycled some villains as well. Like, you ever see a TV show actually recycle assets intentionally that isn't for an Easter egg?
If it's aside from an Easter egg, then yeah.
I mean, like, there's like, it kind of reminds me, like, you know how Disney movies sometimes had characters perform similar animations back then?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember watching Jungle Book after I watched Sword in the Stone, and I know for a fact that two wolves would run up to like Arthur in Sword of the Stone and start licking him before they got pulled away from him. Then a similar thing happened when the Jungle Book, when two wolves ran up to Mowgli and started licking him before they, like, backed away a bit, with no one to grab them. So I thought to myself, wait a minute, that looks similar. Another thing happened like that again with their own Robin Hood movie, where a big, like, bear was dancing, and he looked just like Baloo, except one of the other characters was replaced with, or either replaced or was replaced with King Louie. I'm going to presume it's a rotoscoping thing, but I'm not too familiar with it, nor do I honestly care, because, like, I'm not that super obsessed with older Disney movies that much. I mean, I have seen them, yes, but if you ask me, my preferred Disney was older Pixar, and the 90s and 2000s stuff. But, moving on, yeah, like, older Spider-Man series from the 1967 days was not the best, but we got better from there, so we also got ourselves another Spider-Man show. I want to say from the 70s or 80s. But that one was more or less best known for tying in with the likes of Spider-Woman. Now, you might be familiar with Spider-Woman. What do you think of that character?
I only know her for the different suit and not really looking like a spider at all, so I don't really have that much interest with her.
That's fair enough. Either way, though, it's just kind of, like, interesting to see how soon we got another Spider-Man show after the 1967 one, although it took, like, 11 years for it to be made. This one was much closer to the original comic stuff, especially now that Marvel got involved, which I think is for the better, because the original show just didn't really have much going on with it, if I'm being honest. It was very low budget. So, yeah, 1981 Spider-Man is much better for that. But, like, apart from that, and being known for having more of a Marvel influence, it was also animated by Toei, which is best known for animating stuff like the original Transformers show, G.I. Joe, and lots of iconic anime from the past and the present, I guess. We all like Toei, don't we? Even though the company's kind of shit when it comes to handling certain IPs.
Yeah.
But there's one show from the past that I did like and I saw much more than the others. It'd have to be Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Now, I'm not sure about you, but I saw that show back when it was on Jetix somehow, which is weird. Because, like, I just don't know how or why they wanted to release Jetix, or why Jetix wanted to put that show on, like that, because it just seems weird, since like the next show we'll get into had a much more modern look to it. It was much more action-packed, much more dynamic. So to see Spider-Man and his amazing friends on Jetix was strange. But that being said, though, I liked it. It was great to see not just Spider-Man get into the action, but also the Iceman from the X-Men comic books. Which is kind of weird to look back on X-Men and other media, because I always assumed he was a friend of Spider-Man, but hey, he can always tag along. Amusingly, the thing about Firestar was, okay, so did you know that, apparently there were some rights issues with the Human Torch at one point, before Fox got involved?
No, I didn't.
So apparently, for some stupid-ass reason, the Human Torch was used in the TV rights for a Universal movie or pilot or TV show that never got made. So instead of giving us the Human Torch in the second Fantastic Four show, they replaced him with Herbie, which is just a weird decision to look back on, because it'd be like if you were to replace Tails with another character just because Sega gave the rights to use Tails to another company to make a movie about him that never even got made. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So originally there would have been a Human Torch and Mark Spider-Man and his Amazing Friends, and instead they chose to give us Firestar, which I think is for the better because it makes Spider-Man and his Amazing Friends a little more unique. And it was honestly a better show than its rival show, Super Friends. Because if I'm being honest, Super Friends is okay at best. Apart from the classic DC comic look to it, it was kind of hard to remember some stuff. Maybe it's because I'm more used to a fan of the modern Justice League cartoons from the 2000s now, for the most part, but yeah, Spider-Man and Friends was decent. We actually got ourselves the voice of Spider-Man to be portrayed by Dan Gilvezan, who was best known for voicing G1 Bumblebee, even before he got to voice Bumblebee proper, so that's pretty cool, don't you think?
Yeah.
And speaking of another Transformers voice actor, we got Frank Welker to voice him as Iceman / Bobby Drake. He also got to voice the likes of Flash Thompson, Matt Murdock, Uncle Ben, so Megatron's voice actor was voicing plenty of Marvel characters, and Optimus Prime's voice actor Peter Cullen was voicing other Marvel heroes and villains as well, like Hulk, Mysterio, and Red Skull. Pretty cool, eh?
Yeah.
It's just so funny to look back on this stuff because, you don't know how often a character or which voice actor would voice which character, and then you find out it's oh damn, that's pretty cool. Especially since the Hulk made sense. I was surprised that Frank Welker voiced Iceman, since Iceman was a fairly young guy, don't you think?
Yeah, I'd say that.
So yeah, we have ourselves some fairly, we definitely got an increase in quality for Spider-Man cartoons, but the true quality increased the moment we went to the 1994 Spider-Man show. Now this is the one a lot of people in the current generation would have seen back on either Fox Kids or Jetix. So now you get to tell me what you think about that series, because I know you have a lot to say about it.
Yeah, I'm still far behind on it. I've only completed season 1, but that is enough, I'll say. So yeah, I will say that the 94 Spider-Man cartoon is just amazing. I can tell just a lot of heart was put into it, and I will say that it is definitely a comic book strip come to life in the form of a TV show. The choice of using Hobgoblin instead of Goblin, I'd say in my opinion, I'd say that was kind of weird, but I can accept that since I'm pretty sure Hobgoblin was new at the time. So of course they want to use someone new. Um, um, yeah, lots of stuff, and it was really amazing. I really do plan on returning to the show. It's just I have a few other shows I still have to get back on, but that's besides the point. Um, yeah, I will say that the show really uh, defined a generation that was before the movies. Like I'd say, and I don't know if this is an opinion most people have come up with, but I'd say that this cartoon was the blueprint for the movies. I just want to go ahead and say that because I really do think that's the truth. This cartoon was pretty much the basis for what was to come for Spider-Man in in TV shows and the movies.
I guess it does make sense. Although the movie has, at least the first one has been made, was at least developed for many years as they try to look for the right script and the right director and cast and whatnot. But I could see that being something that could make sense. But as for my thoughts on the TV show, I love it. It was great to see a much more dynamic TV show, especially since at the time, like, I'd usually be watching stuff like Jake Long, American Dragon, or whatever his name was, as well as Dave the Barbarian and Buzz Lightyear Star Command on Toon Disney. Now with Jetix Turn, I get to save like all the cool action shows and all the Power Ranger stuff. So watching Power Rangers and watching like Spider-Man on the same channel was awesome. And this was before Disney bought Marvel. So to see that sort of thing was just happy memories for me. Like I love watching the commercials leading up to it in a TV show. I don't remember most of the dialogue as a kid because I always felt that the show moved a little too fast. But I do remember most of the lines to an extent. And it's just a well-made show. It was like nice quality. It was well animated. It was much better produced than the other shows we got before. And you can argue that the comic book accuracy is one good thing, but I'd say it's just the quality that mattered. We get a much more iconic voice direction, much more ongoing story arc, and it was just beautiful to look back on because it just felt like it was the new evolution towards superhero shows. Granted, the first X-Men series and Batman the Animated Series came out 2 years before this show, but it was great to see superhero TV shows and comic book shows like evolve from being something campy from the Super Friends days to being something more serialized, more ongoing, and more badass.
Yeah, and of course we can't forget the excellent opening theme for the cartoon. Oh my goodness, it is just beautiful.
Absolutely beautiful, especially considering just how before then it felt kind of like standard, Spider-Man, he's a hero and whatnot, whereas a new theme song for the show gets to the point with all the action and all the cool scenes that we get to have.
And of course, pretty sure the guitar player from Aerosmith was responsible for the theme's riff, which I gotta give him a round of applause to. He did an excellent job at this.
Yep. Much like the comic books, the Spider-Man animated series goes over plenty of different types of lore for the character. There's just so much to list. Obviously, the black suit's one thing, especially with like how the intro would usually show Venom at one point. Although I will say, seeing Venom with like both blue shading and red shading was weird, but I think it was an artistic choice. It was also fascinating to look into stuff like, the story arc where Spider-Man reveals his identity to Mary Jane. I remember seeing a rocket actually crashing into the bridge in New York City. My favorite story arc was just seeing, the fact that Peter was willing to meet other Spider-Men, as well as the fact that he got to meet Madam Web and Stan Lee. You know what's funny? Seeing like a character trying to meet or a character meeting their creator from the real world. Like,
Yeah, but
like
I'd say it just fit, you know.
yeah. I mean, like okay, like nowadays people remember like Patriot the Pirate who wanted to meet SpongeBob, who he was a big fan of. And I remember watching this one low-budget OVA where this guy made himself a self-insert character to dance and interact with his favorite character from an anime he created long ago. But, like, I'm sorry, but seeing, like, the Stan Lee and the Apache the Pirate interactions with Spider-Man and SpongeBob is just much better. Simply because it felt rewarding. And, if you ask me, for the reasons I'm going to bring up, with Stan Lee, it's because, like you've seen him in the flesh in terms of the voice acting and narrating certain stories, but it was cool to actually see him meet Spider-Man in a way. Although it's much more possible now because you can always have someone dress up as Spider-Man and it makes perfect sense. He can make sense as a live-action character. Whereas Apache the Pirate with SpongeBob, I mean, one's a real guy, one's an animated cartoon, so you might have seen the reaction there was for seeing Patchy meet SpongeBob in the show. Whether it was in the 10th anniversary or 20th anniversary. 20th anniversary is admittedly better because it wasn't wasting your time. And neither did the final episode for the animated series of Spider-Man. So, definitely great experience all around. Great TV show, great animation, great music. We even got to see some Marvel superheroes team up as well. It gave us the likes of Blade, who would later on become much more popular thanks to his solo movie made 4 years after the series made its debut. And it even gave us Whistler. Yes, the kids show gave us a character that would later on be a main character in the R-rated movie in the form of Whistler. Yes, that happened. That actually was kind of crazy to look back on, don't you think?
Yeah.
After that, we got ourselves Spider-Man Unlimited, which at first I thought was like some sort of weird sequel because at the time I was watching little bits of Batman Beyond, so I thought to myself, oh yeah, this is like the Batman Beyond to Spider-Man. But let's be real here, this show was sort of like small. It was very minuscule. People didn't care about it that much. Kids were more interested in stuff like what was already coming out, like Pokemon, Digimon. And at that point, the Marvel animated universe was starting to like wane in popularity. And interestingly enough, they wanted to try and do another like adaptation of the original Spider-Man series from the comic books. But it turns out the fact that that Sony and Marvel were already trying to do something like that with the first movie. And Saban couldn't do anything about it, so they had to try and like make a new story, which mostly revolved around Spider-Man trying to go up against Venom and Carnage. It's a pretty decent show, but it does suck by the fact that it was not really well remembered. I mean, granted, I saw quite a bit on Jetix when I had the chance, but that didn't stop it from actually being forgotten about for the most part. And it sucks too because I'm sure there was a lot to make it exciting in a way, but unfortunately people didn't care much about this series. Yet interestingly though, another Spider-Man series that not many people may have seen actually seems to have gotten much more attention put into it. Spider-Man, the new animated series, which is kind of amusing that we're talking about a TV show that was made to tie in with the first movie, was an MTV show. It was kind of hard to remember because it was on MTV. However, despite the fact that it was canceled because they didn't think it would fit in with the other programming, this show is actually fairly popular. What do you think about Spider-Man, the new animated series?
Okay, look, I really loved MTV Spider-Man, like, seriously so much, and the reason why I got into it in the first place was because of a personalized DVD that my mom got me that was made from an old company called Kideo. I'm sure that they're I don't know if they gone bankrupt now, but basically Kideo made these personalized DVDs for many series. They had their own original personalized DVDs, but they also had licensed ones like We Care Bears, Dora the Explorer, and of course Spider-Man. Now the footage they used for their Spider-Man personalized DVD was from MTV, and so basically how this worked was that you would send them a photo of your face, most presumably a child, since it was pretty much a gift for a child, and they would overlay that picture into a CGI model of Spider-Man, which kind of looks rough nowadays, but I still find it charming. And yeah, that's pretty much it. There's the story was changed, obviously, so now it's just a bunch of fights with Spider-Man going up against some of the villains in the show, and pretty much the whole final battle was that Craven was running this entire organization of villains. So yeah, it was changed since, you know, MTV Spider-Man was pretty much a mature show, so they needed to change some things for children. And there was some voice acting. Obviously, Spider-Man wasn't voice act, so he was left on mute. Kind of similar to Julia White not returning for his role for Classic Sonic and Sonic Generations. But yeah, that's how I first knew about MTV Spider-Man. Now, when I actually got to watch the show, oh man, it's really amazing. It's really amazing. There were some original characters there, like this Black Cat wannabe who hooks up with Harry, and then she just leaves. I find that kind of dumb, but like then again, this was an original character, so of course they wanted to just send her off just like that. Obviously there was other villains like Electro, which I don't know. I'm pretty sure this is an unpopular opinion, but I actually kind of like that design of Electro, although it did spawn the whole, Electro from the Amazing Spider-Man 2. But I still kind of like his design. I like how his hair kind of like, I don't know, kind of tries to make it look like the Electro mask. But there are no other villains that didn't make it, like, you know, Venom, Green Goblin, because, you know, like you said, they were trying to fit it in with the future Spider-Man movies, which wouldn't really make that much sense. But yeah, MTV Spider-Man is great. He is absolutely beautiful. I love him very much.
Also, fun fact, this show is made by the same production company that did Beast Wars, as well as Shadow Raiders and Reboot. Although I will say that it might have more in common with the sequel show Beast Machines because of the similar higher quality. I mean, like, it's just like something I miss about older CGI TV shows. There's just something charming about them when they go for a sort of like an edgier, cooler look to them that you can't really replicate unless you're 2D. Although I will say Jimmy Neutron was much more friendlier by comparison. Then again, it's Nickelodeon, this is MTV. And that also reminds me, the show is sadly canceled much like Spider-Man Unlimited. Although, unlike Spider-Man Unlimited, MTV Spider-Man did have a lot of like positive reviews and ratings. I think the problem was just the fact that MTV just didn't find it a good place to air the show, which was stupid. So we're pretty much left with Peter Parker having to abandon his suit for the first time after giving up on his heroic career. So what does this mean? We have no choice but to force it away from continuity so he won't have to try and interfere with Spider-Man 2, since that show, or that movie rather, is mainline canon. It's just something that I find concerning about MTV Spider-Man because I feel like they wanted to continue more, but perhaps they would have been able to mold it differently with the release of Spider-Man 2, since That's bigger canon, and they cannot interfere with it. Same reason why people would need to understand that Star Wars: The Clone Wars needs to be kept away from messing up certain continuity, so they won't try and make things inconsistent with Revenge of the Sith and onward. So after that sort of show, it felt like we were getting ourselves another type of story arc, but however, things went for a different direction with the release of a brand new TV show, The Spectacular Spider-Man. Now that's another show I loved watching, which is just, well, how do I say it's spectacular?
Yeah, I will agree. Especially since I'm still trying to watch the show because of me not having Netflix. But what I've watched so far, yeah, it is definitely spectacular. Josh Keaton's Spider-Man is definitely up in the ranks with a bunch of other Spider-Man. Like, I'm pretty sure he's done other voices for Spider-Man aside from Spectacular Spider-Man. And then obviously there's the possibility that he might be coming back to Across the Spider-Verse. Although those are just rumors, so I won't be really getting my hopes up for that much. But yeah, his performance as Spider-Man is definitely great, especially in the symbiote arc. I love his performance on how he just at first he's still himself, but then the more he stays with the symbiote, the more his voice changes because of his mood. And I really gotta give a hand to Josh Keaton for just delivering that performance very well.
What makes it work is the fact that the TV show's quality, while yes, it was animated differently from the rest of the series, was something that I find fascinating to look back on, because it was just some people would say, oh, it's just like another kiddie show, but in actuality, it ain't, because in comparison to the 90s animated series, this one has a more unique animated style to it, different character designs, different personalities, different ways of approaching lore. So, in addition to that, it also manages to combine new ideas and combining older Spider-Man stories together, which just kind of showcases why this series is spectacular, as it wants to go for the perfect combination of what's already been established with things that we haven't done yet. And I also like the fact that, in a way, Norman is involved with all the sort of stuff behind the scenes. I got to catch up with Season 2 much later, and it just pains me that we didn't get to see Season 3 at least. Because, much like Transformers Animated, studio meddling got involved with this sort of preventing the series from going forward. And it sucks too, because Transformers Animated, we know what they were going to do. We got information regarding stuff like the sort of story that involved Megatron and Sentinel Prime collaborating together to do what they need in order to overthrow the Autobots. Whereas with this series, we had ideas of bringing stuff different versions of Marvel villains, and possibly even having crossovers with the likes of the X-Men and Captain America and Hulk, especially considering the fact that other shows were doing something similar. I mean, I'm not sure if Hulk versus was connected to Wolverine and the X-Men, but I know for a fact that Hulk vs. Thor and Hulk vs. Wolverine were popular in 2009. Although to some people before 2018, it was mostly because of Deadpool. And there's also Iron Man Armored Adventures, which had Iron Man team up with other Marvel characters, and that was a different version of him as well. So it sucks that we can't get anything like that with Spectacular Spider-Man, because whereas Transformers Anime was mostly due to Hasbro wanting to go forward with the Align continuity and Cartoon Network just being shit, this was due to the fact that Disney was buying Marvel at the time, and with them having all the rights that were going to be involved between Disney and Marvel, people were trying to say hashtag Save Spectacular Spider-Man on social media at the time. And they're still doing it to this day, because they would need to see what makes the series popular, because Spectacular Spider-Man is the modern day, like, sort of like TV show I wanted to see. And yeah, it's animated differently from the original show, but that's what makes it unique. It's just something that I don't think we're gonna get these days, because Sony might try to try and do their Universal Marvel characters that aren't as important as Venom, and Disney is just more obsessed with trying to contradict themselves while saying stuff about how they're fighting for diversity, and they don't do it at the same time. So, unfortunately, we only got 2 seasons, but I'd rather have those 2 seasons over what we're about to review next, which is Ultimate Spider-Man. Now, what do you think about Ultimate Spider-Man?
Well, I was there during its premiere, and unfortunately, I never got able to catch up with it. But from what I've seen, some people say it's kind of bad, but in my opinion, I think it's really good. Yeah, sure, there are things that some people may not like about it, but for what I like about it, I yeah, the animation is different, but I'd say it's really good. The voice acting is good. Um, yeah, I just like it, but since around the time this was where TV shows were I mean, I'd say TV shows were just not fitting with my schedule. So yeah, time after time, I just couldn't catch up with it. I was able to watch the whole Spider-Verse arc of the show, where Peter was traveling across lots of multiverses to chase down the Goblin, who was trying to gather Spider-Man DNA so that way he could transform into a more monstrous version of the Goblin. And honestly, it brought us a lot of different art styles of Ultimate Spider-Man. Although it was more like just 2, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it was just 2. That being with Spider-Ham and Spider-Man 2099, which I'd say they put a lot of budget into that, since it was full 3D animated. And I will say that version of Spider-Man kind of looked similar to his model in Spider-Man Web of Shadows, which was one of the games. And yeah, the budget was probably used, most of the budget was used towards that episode with Miguel O'Hara's Spider-Man. But yeah, honestly, I think the show is good, and whoever I respect your opinion on if you think it's bad. I respect that. However, if you just say it should have never existed, you are wrong on that.
I will say, however, that this series itself is a bit of a mixed bag. At first, it kind of looks like it's well animated, and I will give them credit for trying to do something different now that we have other Marvel heroes involved, but I think the high-profile humor they're trying to go for just seems too rapid, and just feels like it's a vague attempt at trying to make its humor different from what's already been done before, without trying to dumb itself down too much. Okay, Peter Parker talking directly to the audience and break the fourth wall, that seems more of a Deadpool thing, but, well, he does appear for one episode. Probably only one that people liked the most of saw the other episodes and didn't like them as much, but I just think that compared to other shows which had struck a happy balance between all the sorts of tropes you find in Spider-Man tones, this one feels more like it's trying to win itself over to kids that probably didn't see the other shows just yet, which I can understand, but I do think that the other seasons improve in quality, especially when it comes to how to handle the crossovers, as you mentioned before. I will say one thing that I find interesting is the fact that while Spider-Man does use a bit of help from Nick Fury and the Avengers and X-Men and so on and so forth, it doesn't feel like it's trying to make itself feel forced in and hard to try and remove, what we did with what they did with the MCU, as we'll get to. This time it feels more like it's them just trying to say, oh, here's Spider-Man, he's getting a little bit of help for these guys in order for them to help him be a better hero, without him just being a bitch boy for Nick Fury and the rest of S.H.I.E.L.D. But apart from all that, though, it's a case where the first series itself at first just didn't work as well, but the rest of it just managed to be better handled. Not 100% perfect, but better handled. I do find some of the differences a little odd, though. Like, Green Goblin just now feels more like a mix between his original traditional design and being more Hulk-like, although with having more mechanical elements onto him. Rhino was weird because obviously in Earth 616 he was a guy dressed up like a rhino, and in the Ultimate Comics he was a robot suit that someone wore, which was the inspiration for Rhino's suit in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, except it was more Transformer. Whereas here, it was just a kid that drank the Rhino serum, and he became Rhino. Okay. So, yeah, Ultimate Spider-Man itself isn't a series I'd recommend to most fans, but if you're a fan of, like, the crossover stuff and the Superhero Squad reference, then this one might be one you're gonna like. And in retrospect, I think it's a better series in comparison to the next one we'll talk about, simply titled Spider-Man. Or rather, Marvel Spider-Man.
Although that title should actually belong to PS4 Spider-Man. Like, I don't know, I just like to call PS4 Spider-Man Marvel Spider-Man, but I can see why people just called the TV show Marvel Spider-Man, because oh my god, like, why no extra title? Why just call it Spider-Man again?
Like, okay, first off, I have to say this. How come, like, the promo art looks so dynamic looking and so unique and almost reminiscent of both the, like an amalgamation of the Scott Johnson's artwork as well as what we've seen with the other sort of story arcs. But then we get something like the TV show animation, which just looks so mediocre and just, like, frustrating to look back on.
I even tried to give the show just a chance, but oh my god, I could not just stand it at all. Like, even Octavius, like I know he is kind of similar to, like, in Spectacular Spider-Man, but in design, but like he's kind of a dick. Like, I'm not gonna lie, he's just pissed for no reason.
And of course, like, I think this series tries so hard to try and combine elements of all the other current Spider-Man stuff, you know, like MCU influences, current influences with the likes of Gwen Stacy and Miles Morales. But apart from those things, it just feels uninspired. It's like a low-budget, friendly version of a Spider-Man series that no one's gonna remember unless it's used for a meme. I mean, I remember, like, the meme where Spider-Man's dabbing, and the actual rest of the series, it's just so bland. The animation itself is just, like, reminiscent of modern anime, where the animation itself is, like, desaturated or filtered or just doesn't look like it's gonna pop. And I don't know much about the voice acting or the character designs that much, apart from the promo art, but I will say, though, I remember seeing toys at Walgreens that had these little backpacks on the characters, where you just press on them and you have webbing come out from them, which is just a little string. Is that it? Is that it for the merchandise? Because that's very low, if you ask me. It just doesn't make any sense. And apparently there's a third series called Maximum Venom. Guess what that's trying to capitalize on?
Yeah, and we'll be getting into that when we get to the movies.
Yeah.
Because, like, boys, Venom.
But, like, the thing is that, okay, so first of all, you're trying to capitalize on Venom, but why happen to Maximum Carnage? Is Carnage too hard of a word to use for a kid's show? Like, come on now. I'm just surprised that people kind of, like, reviewed it and then they just moved on, because this series just feels more like it's trying to do so many things with introducing new characters, but it just feels like it's uninspired all around. I mean, as much as you try and force in, like, the Guardians of the Galaxy or the Avengers, or anyone else that isn't Fantastic Four or X-Men for some reason, despite the fact they already own Fox now, and that means we own the rest of the MCU. it just doesn't work like that. It just seems strange, and overall, like, I'm not a fan of the series. It's just mediocre all around and uninteresting, if you ask me. And they're now doing another series that's about MCU Spider-Man's origin story for the MCU on Disney Plus. I don't care about it, to be honest. Like, I mean, yeah, we're getting Norman Osborn, and apparently it's going to be like an alternate reality, but at the same time, it feels like y'all should have done something like that instead of just trying to make Spider-Man the next Iron Man so you can spite Sony, which we'll get to later on. So now we covered all the sorts of comic books and TV shows that we got, but as a bit of an intermediate thing, let's talk about Spider-Man for a moment. So, Spider-Man, Japanese Spider-Man, best known for being a bit of a collaborative between Marvel and Toei, and he also helped kickstart the popularity that we got with Super Sentai later on, and to an extent, Power Rangers. Spider-Man is one of those characters that you probably would expect to find at random on YouTube, but you gotta admit he's a pretty cool asset of the franchise despite not being accurate to the traditional lore. What do you think about Spider-Man?
Well, sure is the emissary from hell, and honestly, this is I will agree that this is around the time where, you know, things were just kind of pretty wacko with whatever IP was being thrown around at the time. Now, I still have yet to actually see this wonderful masterpiece of a TV show, but from as far as I've seen, for its time, I can honestly be pretty entertained by it. I won't lie.
Yeah, it's a pretty absurd show, but it doesn't come from the fact that it's like franchise negligence or whatnot. The bigger thing was that this was a deliberate decision because Toei was trying to make its own interpretation of Spider-Man, and Stan Lee liked Super Sentai, so they thought, hey, let's collaborate together. I think there would have been a sequel, a Japanese-inspired Captain America, but either that was scrapped in favor of Battle Fever J, which had characters like characters inspired by Japan, a character inspired by Africa, and one character whose name is the only one I remember best, Miss America, because she reminds me of the name Miss Pac-Man, and because her name is fairly easy to remember. We didn't get the Captain America sequel, but I think that was also inspired for another series, like Sun Valken. Yeah, like Super Sentai itself was very different when it comes to handling certain things compared to nowadays, where they have an idea of how gimmicks work, character assets and whatnot. But Spider-Man definitely showcases how different Tokusatsu is back then compared to now. Visuals weren't that flashy, most of the effects were pretty practical, but it did introduce us Leopardon, which is he's pretty much a grandfather for the Megazords and super robots that we'd always see in Tokusatsu. It's a very different interpretation of Spider-Man, but I think this is all deliberate because unlike the 1967 TV show, which was very loose with its stuff beyond just a general understanding of Spider-Man, these decisions were pretty intentional. Think of it as like how Super Mario Land is a very different style for Mario games compared to the original platformers, all because they wanted to go for a different approach. That's how I feel when I look at Spider-Man compared to the normal Marvel lore. It's an all-around very different way of reinterpreting the franchise, and I'm happy to see that the character is being loved to this day because it's just kind of interesting to see how not only they depicted the character, but also seeing the reaction, you know, considering the fact that this isn't just like Power Rangers where they take existing footage and reinterpretize it differently. Like, this is a brand new story that we got, and the aforementioned Emissary from Hell just feels unique compared to the many, many different spider heroes we see in the web of Spider-Man. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
But with all that brought up, why don't we talk about the video games next? There is a lot of Spider-Man video games that we gotta talk about, no doubt thanks to the movie tie-ins, which I want to save instead for the movies themselves, but yeah, our first Spider-Man video game was on Atari 2600. You had to climb up a building, and it was pretty simple. Moving on. We had plenty of other games on the different type of consoles, like mostly from the 80s and 90s. I want to say 80s, but you never know. I think people remember like the video games from the 90s best thanks to the popularity of the Marvel animated series that came out. But the one that truly got people's attention was Spider-Man and the Kingpin. But after that was the PS1, N64, and Dreamcast game made near like the late 90s, early 2000s. That game itself was the blueprint for all the other Spider-Man games we'd find years later, which makes perfect sense because this is a game that perfected the kind of gameplay style we'd expect. Whereas most games were 2D platformers, this one was more of an open platformer game with a bit of an open world influence. Like you can go around certain parts of New York City if you like, although it depends on level from level. I mean, you pretty much can't go down the building since most of the city is just covered with all this sort of like light and fog that you can't like go down in, or else you're going to get a game over. This game itself was pretty solid, I'd say. Although I remember Electro more so from the PS1 demo disc that I got at one point in my life. Admittedly, the second game isn't as well received as the first one, but there are a few things I do like about it. Mostly just due to the fact that it manages to do something different from the first game. I'm not sure how much I would recommend one or the other, but if you're interested in older Spider-Man games, like those two are pretty good titles to get. But if you want something that's more like, I'd say, polished in a way, with a similar gameplay mindset, I'd say you should go for Spider-Man 2 or Ultimate Spider-Man. Now, the Ultimate Spider-Man video game, I think, would be a great way for people to understand Ultimate Spider-Man without getting into the comic books, because it does like tick the mark for what you'd expect from that series, and having it be in a similar engine to what we saw with Spider-Man 2 is pretty good. And at the same time, it doesn't feel like a reskin of the original game. It just feels like a different take on it, while still feeling like a proper Spider-Man game. I will say some of the controls might be a little different than what you'd expect if you're so used to playing one over the other, but ultimately it's worth it. And it's even cool to have certain missions where you play as a different character, or when you're racing against someone else. But I remember when my brother and I were struggling to race against the Human Torch because he was kind of fast. But I'm pretty sure there are games that you probably might be more familiar with, like Webs of Shadows, or Shared Dimensions, I think was one of the titles, or Edge of Time.
Yes, I am very familiar with those games. I'd say first Spider-Man game that I ever played was definitely Web of Shadows on one of my cousins. I'm not sure if it was Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3, but yeah, it was Web of Shadows. And when I got to know more about the game, I will say that it is definitely on top with the greatest Spider-Man games of all time.
I will say that some people might find it a little bit similar to, for those that are unaware, it's reminiscent of the type of Spider-Man game that was meant to be made for the fourth movie before it got cancelled, at least from what I remember. However, I like the fact that you go for either normal or symbiote routes, and you also interact with other characters as well, such as Wolverine. There was another game made beforehand that was more so aimed at like normal kids, which was Friend or Foe. That game was a tie-in towards the Spider-Man 3 movie that came out at the time. The main idea was the fact that you team up with Spider-Man villains of the past, both ones from the movies and ones that were newly made, and you team up with them to take down certain foes. Nick Fury made an appearance as well. And I think that was one of the last few times we see like modern media use a Nick Fury that's from the Earth 616 design before being more so replaced by the MCU iteration of Nick Fury, which was inspired by Ultimate Nick Fury, the comic books, Samuel L. Jackson style. Apart from all that, though, the thing I find ironic about Friend or Foe is that that game itself was pretty much the reverse for Spectacular Spider-Man. James Arnold Taylor voiced Spider-Man in that game, and Josh Keaton voiced Harry, which doesn't really make much sense because neither of them sound anything like Tobey Maguire or James Franco. But one of them would be close enough, it'd be Josh Keaton. However, he voiced Spider-Man, and James Arnold Taylor voiced like Harry Osborn in Spectacular. So where's the synergy in that, guys? Yeah, it's just one of those weird things, but it was a kind of amusing thing nonetheless. Apart from all that, however, there were a couple of other Spider-Man games that were worth exploring. Most of them just being the movie tie-ins, but to their credit, there were a few other examples. What other Spider-Man games did you like that came out before the PS4 game?
Well, there wasn't really much Spider-Man games at the time, but I do remember Spider-Man Unlimited, which was a mobile game, which was sadly discontinued like a few years ago. I remember getting commercials for the pre-orders of the Amazing Spider-Man game for Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, and also the Amazing Spider-Man 2, which came out on the next gen of consoles, as well as the previous gen, which was Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and like I said, the previous generation. And I'm pretty sure it also got a 3DS release, apparently. Yeah, it got a 3DS release and a Wii U version as well. I've only ever seen those commercials, but I never actually got to play them in these Spider-Man games, or pretty much any other game around this time, since I didn't really have a console before, I'd say, like 2019.
Apart from all the big name Spider-Man games, the web singer is also showing other sort of like crossover stuff as well. Like, he's obviously best known for being in Marvel Ultimate Alliance. There was also the sequel for it. He was in Marvel vs. Capcom, which was he was pretty much like a mainstay character. He's not like Iron Man, who was best known for popping up in the sequel, whereas War Machine was only in the first game. Or the X-Men, who were pretty much like removed in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite because of Disney being Disney. And the Fantastic Four, because I don't know why they were never in the games to begin with, at least for what I remember. But Spider-Man was in those games. He was pretty iconic in those series. He was also in stuff like Superhero Squad, not the TV show though, but instead of video games, which is fine. Also voiced by Josh Keaton. And of course, like, who can forget, like, Marvel Superheroes, which gave us all sorts of fun things to do with him, because it was a great way to explore New York City while swinging around as him, even if he's a little more safe and compared to the other console equivalents. And of course, we can forget all the normal, like, mobile phone games, but fuck all those. If there's one thing I do miss, it was the fact that we got plug-and-plays back then. And one of the things I liked doing was playing the Jakks Pacific Spider-Man game, which had you fight against a couple of villains in the streets, or like shoot web at specific images and try not to shoot any web at the allies. Trying to like shoot web at Venom to prevent him from throwing bombs, as well as like trying to escape Blizzard from chasing after you in the sewers, and even like stopping Vulture from bombing a construction site. Which I just saw a video of it a while back, and I thought to myself, holy crap, I remember this. Like, man, plug and plays are just so extinct at this point. You're only gonna get them best for like nostalgic stuff, or if it's something high-end quality like the Sega or what Nintendo did with the NES and SNES Mini, and Sega Genesis as well. And I think Sony PlayStation did as well, but I think it's going to be harder to do that with all the other games because of the licensing that you're going to find from like movie tie-ins or games based on TV shows. But if there's one thing we have to say about Spider-Man video games that hasn't been said yet, it's the fact that it's pretty much hard to argue with the inclusion of Marvel's Spider-Man, made by Insomniac, which perfected the formula for the current generation. So, what do you think of it?
Well, I will say that, yeah, like you said, Spider-Man PS4 pretty much perfected the formula for how Spider-Man games should be. It's very polished, the story is great, characters are great, and just the customization with suits is just really, really, really great. Um, yeah, with the inclusion of the next game in the series, Miles Morales, which was originally supposed to be a DLC add-on, it became its own game, and I will say that game is definitely uh, better than the first one, if you will. And of course, there's the upcoming Spider-Man 2, which is exclusively for PS5, hopefully coming out on PC as well. I'm very excited for it because, the whole inclusion of Venom and the supposed co-op mode for Peter and Miles in the game. So, yeah, I'm excited for that.
And what makes it great is the fact that in the time period where Marvel video games are just relegated to mobile phone apps and the occasional tie-in here and there for the MCU only, this feels like a massive project that has been in the making. Previous Spider-Man games have done some great things in the past when it comes to the open world aspect as well as customization, but Insomniac perfected the formula by not just making a brand new method of gameplay, but making it much more refined, much more intuitive, but they also made it much more engaging. The combat system is much more involved this time around than before, and it's great too because you can do so much with just the same sort of gameplay style that we had with Spider-Man games in the past for the movie tie-ins. So them just doing something entirely different is worth it, if you ask me. And the same can be said for the story as well. A much older Peter Parker is now involved with a new story arc, and we actually get to see Aunt May pass away. Doc Ock shows himself some redemption at one point near the end. It's just a very unique story that we haven't done before, and I'm happy that we get something like that because it kind of showcases the fact that Insomniac wants to make their own stamp on Spider-Man lore. One that isn't just based on a comic book tie-in or something that's already been done with a movie. This feels unique, this feels original, this feels engaging, and I'm just happy to see everything that unfolds with this game, especially the sequel as well. I mean, you mentioned the fact that Spider-Man Miles Morales was meant to be a DLC before it became its own game, and in this case, I think it's for the best because it kind of showcases the fact that, well, in a way, I kind of feel like this was in response to COVID because of the fact that the pandemic sort of messed people up and people needed something to get their mind out of it for a bit with the game. So this was a pretty good I wouldn't even say appetizer. It feels like a proper full meal in a way, and the perfect way to chapter us into Spider-Man 2 with both characters popping up together and taking on Venom, as you mentioned. It's just great to see Spider-Man Miles Morales, where he's the star of his own game, and he also gets to have his own ways of trying to make himself prove that he's a good Spider-Man. And even surprising is the fact that Peter Parker doesn't die. He just says, "All right, Miles, you take over this area. I wish you luck." And Miles has his own things to worry about as well. It's it's just fascinating to look into because no one would expect Miles Morales to get a game of his own until now, and while he was around in 2018, before 2018 with the Ultimate Comics, and then him being transferred towards Earth 616 with Secret Wars 2, I think it was, this feels like the right way to give Miles respect, because like I said before, 2020 gave us the new Warriors with those stupid-ass character designs, and if you ask me if I would choose between either Safe Space and Snowflake or Miles Morales, I would definitely choose Miles Morales. I'll say it again. Miles Morales is just the perfect sort of way to make a modern Marvel legend because he's more than just a race-swapped or race-bent character that already exists. He's his own identity, and he has his own ways of trying to strive to make himself stand out amongst others. But, apart from all that, now we gotta talk about the movie side of things, which, let's do it. So, for many years, Spider-Man has been developing a movie of some kind. with various directors and stars said to be in the role. Most notably, an example being an R-rated type of script that it was directed by James Cameron, best known for Terminator, and having Leonardo DiCaprio, who's best known for being in stuff like Titanic, I think. So you pretty much have what seemed like a pretty interesting movie to make, but whether or not it would have been similar in style to the Superman and Batman movies that came out in the 80s and 90s, we're not sure. Because Spider-Man's movie is a very different style from the movies we got before Blade. Because I'm being honest, I think a lot of older superhero movies hold up poorly. Not because of visual effects, not because of casting, although they do feel like they use the casting first, movie quality second approach. Batman and Robin. But the main thing is that it feels like these feel like just normal movies. Whereas with Spider-Man, it feels more like a story, if that makes sense. When I say that, I refer to the fact that there really isn't much of like a motivation to move forward in the story for Superman movies. It feels like stuff just happens. Whereas in Spider-Man, it feels like one thing affects another. And it feels very like we utilize that approach very well. In addition to the writing style being much more natural, it feels more organic, and it feels like a proper story that I've gotten from Spider-Man. In addition to the cast also delivering that like mindset as well, we already know the praise for Peter Parker's Tobey Maguire, as well as like the likes of J.K. Simmons, Willem Dafoe, James Franco, blah blah blah. Like, we know these guys already, but what I will say is the fact that compared to Christopher Reeve's Superman and Michael Keaton Batman, although more so that extends to George Clooney Batman, the characters in the Raimi trilogy feel like they're actual characters, not just actors pretending to be characters, you know?
Definitely.
Like, when I look at Christopher Reeve Superman, I mean, like, the average, like, 80s person gonna be like, oh my god, Christopher Reeve Superman, he's my bae! And, like, that's just Christopher Reeve dressed up as Superman. And, like, George Clooney's Batman, people are gonna be like, well, they're gonna agree already, but even Michael Keaton's Batman, he just felt more like the guy dressed up as Batman. Like, it just didn't really feel like he was being someone else entirely different. But it's still better than Christopher Reeve. Whereas Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, he felt like this is Spider-Man in real life. It feels like I would meet him if I were to go to New York City. Like, I can imagine, like, him stopping some burglars and he would just, like, tell me, go somewhere safe before he jumps away. And I'd probably like, oh my crap, it's Spider-Man! If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, the movie itself is also great as well. But it definitely feels like a great way of making a modern story. Showcasing the importance of Spider-Man's role as a protector. Showcasing how Peter Parker went from being a high school student to a graduate to then working at the Daily Bugle for a little bit. Make some money. How everything changes the moment he becomes bitten by the spider and his powers develop and he becomes a hero. Because everything is centered around him. And what he does will affect, like, things in growing quantities. Like, that spider bite changed his life as a whole. He lost his Uncle Ben after an incident that he pretty much like should have prevented. That causes him to become a hero for New York City, taking a Spider-Man mantle as a new status. And then we also see the likes of him interfering with Green Goblin and all the other characters, like, centering around Peter Parker, not knowing that he's Spider-Man. Like, him getting like a Green Goblin indirectly killed was what affected the sort of like relationship that Peter and Harry had in the later films, as well as Mary Jane just feeling like Peter Parker wouldn't like understand what's going on with his normal life before she finds out, oh yeah, you're Spider-Man, and she appreciates him more. Or like Aunt May sort of like feeling a bit like involved in some ways with the villains. More so in the first two movies, she wasn't that involved in the third movie, apart from just giving advice to Peter about his life. And it kind of showcases the kind of writing that superhero movies need, because, like I said before, in the original Superman movies, especially, like, stuff just happens, and it doesn't feel like it's something that would actually feel natural nowadays. Whereas with Spider-Man, it feels like it's a proper way to refine stuff. Like Christopher Reeve, like I think like Spider-Man is what Christopher Reeve Superman tried to do, but not as well as Spider-Man did. Not because of poor VFX or whatever, but more so because the writing style just felt too flat in comparison. And it felt more like they used big-name actors for the sake of making the movie appealing to adults, whereas with Spider-Man, it felt like something anyone could watch. You know, kids like Spider-Man a lot, but I think older fans would actually appreciate it for the more realistic storytelling. And it's something I'll always value too, because like I always thought that movies were either going, like when I was a kid, I always thought live-action movies were either going to be something cartoony looking, like the Grinch adaptation, or something that was going to be super adult, like 007. I wouldn't understand as much. Whereas Spider-Man is a movie I understood as a kid, and I understood more and more as I got older, with different appreciations all around. Understanding how I feel for Peter Parker, and wanting him to succeed. And that especially applies to the second movie.
Yeah, these movies directed by the wonderful Sam Raimi, they definitely mean a lot to me. Like you said, these stories are crafted very, very well. Sam put in a lot of thought into these movies, even with some interference with the studio in the third movie. But that didn't stop this trilogy from being just an absolutely amazing series that pretty much made lots of people's childhoods. Even if they just turn on this trilogy now and just call it nostalgia, but it's more nostalgia. But it's more than just nostalgia. It's the fact that movies are very well written, and these characters, and like I said at the very beginning, Peter is relatable, and it still carries the whole trope of your actions have consequences. Now I've been watching these movies with the director commentaries, and I could just tell that Sam just knows, he just knows the character very well. Even if he had stopped reading the comics religiously, he still knew the whole character on Spider-Man, and that shows a lot in these movies. That's what makes these movies very, very amazing, very beautiful. They are icons to the character, and if you just say the word Spider-Man, like when Spider-Man comes up to my mind, the one thing I'm always gonna think about, because of how it started with for me and this character, is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Just because of how not only did it make my childhood, but just how very beautifully these movies were written. Spider-Man 2, to this day, is still, in my opinion, or I don't think it's even an opinion at this point, the best superhero movie of all time. Next to, with second place being The Dark Knight, in my opinion. But yeah, Spider-Man 2 is the greatest superhero movie of all time. And Spider-Man 3, even though it was my first movie I'd ever watched, I will agree that there are flaws with it. Although Sam never wanted those. I will be honest that he never wanted Venom in the movie, and recently saying that with the editor recently saying that Sam doesn't really want an actual director's cut or any of the deleted scenes to be released. I can understand how he doesn't want that. He just wants these movies to just let them be. But for us fans who want to preserve these movies in the best way possible. It is a shame that we probably won't be seeing these deleted scenes fully intact anytime soon. All we have is photos like the Venom puppet, which was used in the teaser trailer for Spider-Man 3. Flint Marco's wife and his daughter showing up at the final battle before he kills Peter. And then of course there is the deleted scene where Eddie's skull was shown after being blown up, and we can see that at that point the symbiote was just fused with Eddie, and we can see that the teeth are like very, very sharp, and like just the way the skull looked was very different to a human skull, showing how if Peter just kept sticking with the symbiote, it would have just, you know, stick with him, and that's what would have become of him. But another thing that just makes these movies very, very iconic is of course Danny Elfman's theme, who also made the theme for Batman with Michael Keaton. And there's lots in the soundtracks across the trilogy that are very iconic, like the Responsibility theme. But in my opinion, nothing can top anything, and I mean anything, that Danny Elfman has made, or pretty much any soundtrack in any media of all, is the main titles theme. Every time I hear this, I get a shiver down my spine, and I just know for a fact that I'm gonna be with Sam and with Tobey's Spider-Man in this journey, because it's preparing me for what is going to happen. The main title theme is definitely just a masterpiece at music. I always listen to this theme, and I think to myself, this is Spider-Man's theme across all media, in my opinion. That is Spider-Man's theme. Just a simple heroic beat that gives out. It just really gives out that theme, you know, of heroism, and the theme is different with every movie. With the first movie's main title theme being my personal favorite, while also, you know, you can't forget Spider-Man 2's and Spider-Man 3's. Spider-Man 3's is which had a different direction with Christopher Young. He still kept it very, very great, especially with Venom's theme. Venom's theme is very amazing, especially the first time Peter comes intact with the symbiote. That theme sends me a shiver down my spine, because this was the first time that Peter starts to feel the symbiote, and he asks himself, what is this? And the music really just in the scene, I can't describe it, it's just
resonating,
amazing. Yes, and that's how I feel about the main title theme. There are no words to describe it. It's just amazing, and that's what makes these movies, in my opinion, peak cinema, aside from a certain series that I love very much. But yeah, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man is a trilogy that should be looked up to, and I think that all superhero movies should look at this trilogy and say, what can I do to be on the same level as this trilogy?
The thing about Spider-Man's trilogy is the fact that it has itself an identity of its own. Apart from just having a cast that resonates with the characters very well, and a theme song that knows how to get people like reeled into their seats, and excited to watch what's going to happen. It knows how to be unique amongst other entries. Look at the MCU currently. How many theme songs do you remember for that series? Or how many characters or stories or scenes you remember? Because people always eat up a new MCU movie, they talk about the memes or whatnot, or the gags, and they just like forget about it in favor of the next Marvel movie. That shit's been happening for so many years, and in comparison to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, just feels much more engaging to watch with reruns and rewatches and everything. The difference is the fact that these movies aren't trying to go for a quantity approach. It was always about quality. And I'd say quality is another thing that they strive with, especially with the stories. Apart from the typical origin story for the first one, we got to see Peter Parker down on his luck in the second movie, and we wanted him to succeed. We saw him trying to make the most out of what he can do without when his powers weren't available for him, like when he saved a little girl from a burning apartment, and when he decided to finally try and confess his feelings to MJ at one point. And then after that, he goes up against Doc Ock, and Doc Ock's just a great villain. Like, Norman Osborn gets a lot of attention, but Doc Ock's also great as well, being a much more sympathetic guy, because whereas Norman Osborn was easier to corrupt, there was a much warmer heart with Otto than there was with Norman. Like, there was less cynicism with Otto, and he felt he was a villain for sure. He didn't feel like it was directly his fault because of his obsession with completing his project and the tentacles messing up his mind. And I gotta say, Sam Raimi being a great horror director, that sort of scene was a perfect way to put horror inside a movie, with him and his tentacles freaking out all the doctors involved. Shame we didn't get anything like that with Multiverse of Midness. Sure, Scarlet Witch killed Professor X, whoop-de-friggin-do. Superman did it better with Zod and Man of Steel. But that's a story for another day. Probably not, I don't know, I don't care. But yeah, this series has identity. It knows how to make its humor work well. The jokes knew how to land, the story knew how to work well. The characters were well-rounded all around. It's just great up and down and all around. And the third movie itself, I know people probably either like it or they don't like it, but I think more so people like it nowadays. Especially in retrospect. While yes, there is the sort of stuff of a director's cut, I will say that Spider-Man 3 currently is still a good movie on its own. Granted, I prefer Spider-Man 2, but it doesn't feel like a massive quality dip. We still got the same cast, the VFX are still the same, writing style is still the same. It's just a thing that some people might not agree with when it comes to how certain things are handled, like Tobey Maguire, who's a meme nowadays, but back then people were like, oh, why is he like an emo? He's not a good guy anymore. Yeah, his movie sucks balls. More than my mom. But I think people forget about the fact that all that sort of stuff was more so the symbiote's influence. Kind of showcasing the fact that Harry Osborn isn't the true villain, neither is Sandman. Instead, it's just this inanimate object that, quite frankly, showcases the fact that not every antagonist is going to be a human being, but it could also be something that will corrupt a person that we already look up to. The Black Symbiote itself is awesome, but when you set the awesomeness aside, what you're left with is a dangerous item that is going to corrupt anything that it bonds to. Peter Parker is becoming much more egotistical and selfish, and using his pride as a way to amplify itself, to the point where he pretty much abuses other people in a way, yelling at poor Dickovich and accidentally punching MJ, and making himself a smug dude in front of everybody else. It was his pride that took up most of his power-ups, and it kind of made him stronger, yeah, but at the same time, it just made itself feel more like he was becoming a dick, and when he realized that, he decided that he must get rid of it. And getting rid of it, he did, which, the aforementioned stuff about Venom just being a darker side of Spider-Man works well here. And I know there's all this stuff about the director's cut with, Sandman, with, Venom popping up with his skull Freddy, as well as, the puppet, and the, scene where Peter just, looks into the mirror and Venom pops up. But I think it's just meant to showcase this way you can interpret it as the symbiote just initially being something that corrupts Peter little by little before it comes back to him in a physical form. He is unaware of what would happen until he finds out, and it's too late, but he does stop Venom. The director's cut thing, I'm going to be honest and say that I understand what people want to see it for, but ultimately I do feel like Spider-Man 3 itself, director's cut or no, is still a good movie. Like I said, it's not as good as Spider-Man 2, but if the quality dip between 2 and 3 is minor, and we can definitely say that I've seen worse with quality dips, like Batman Forever compared to Batman Returns. A quality dip is like 25% of a dip, whereas Spider-Man 3 is more of like a 5 to 10% dip in quality. And then Batman and Robin is a massive like spiral downhill. The difference is that whereas Batman and Robin just feels more like it's just like a lousy movie trying to capitalize on toy commercials and whatnot and trying to appeal to the soccer moms. And Superman 4 is just a movie nobody gave a fuck about because it just looked like shit, and Christopher Reeve just like got drunk during production at one point. Spider-Man 3 just feels more like it's just not everything lining up how it should, but what they did do nonetheless was still well done, well made, polished, and overall still enjoyable. I can understand why people want to fight for it, but at the same time, I need more than just like, oh, hashtag release the Raimi cut. You know what Zack Snyder fans did to fight for Zack Snyder's Justice League? What did they do? Beyond just putting it up the hashtag.
You said that they donated to charity, specifically suicide prevention.
Yes.
And sadly, what happened with Zack Snyder's daughter.
Exactly. Not only that, but they also helped Subway feed like sandwiches to homeless people, which did a lot more of a contributions towards doing like something to do good for the world compared to what Jared Fogel's stupid ass did with his so-called like childhood obesity prevention program, which did jack shit. And people are trying to ignore all the good things Zack Snyder fans did for that in favor of trying to like do the stupid ass typical like or bots or contests or whatever. And when in reality, like they're much nicer people than the people that criticize them badly, because of course. Sam Raimi fans, I'm not sure if they're still doing Spider-Man 3's director's cut campaigns, but I will say, however, I do agree with them wanting to do like Spider-Man 4, because unlike Madam Web, I think Spider-Man 4 would make a lot more money for Sony. However, I still need them to try and do more than just using the hashtag. Why not just help try and like keep schools safe, or why not help or contribute towards like donating school supplies, or doing like a charity drive for the homeless. I'm not sure which type of like campaign leaders want to do that without trying to get some clout for themselves or trying to just like get some money stuck in, but if they ever get something like that where people are willing to contribute for something good in society, count me in please, because I want to see Spider-Man 4 and I also want to like show that I want to fight for Spider-Man 4 by doing something good for humanity. Back in 2011, however, we didn't get Spider-Man 4, although I do remember a year before then that there was a trailer for Spider-Man 4, which I don't remember much of it. All I remember was just a guy talking to Peter about his parents, and he says, "Oh, you know my parents?" That's all I remember. And it's gone. Straight up gone. Ultimately, though, the Spider-Man 4 that we would have wanted probably won't be the one that we may get if Sony decides, okay, let's use Tobey Maguire more often because he's interested. But hey, just do it quickly because these actors aren't going to be around forever. And hurry up, Sony, because like we don't want to be teased with any more Spider-Man stuff. Remember when friggin' Marvel made a special announcement for Spider-Man, but they made a countdown that began with 4? And then it just turned out to be like some stupid-ass comic book made by J.J. Abrams?
I was there. I saw it on Instagram and everyone was freaking out. I was freaking out too, because I was like, Spider-Man 4? It's finally happening? And then like the next day, it's just 3. And I'm like, oh, it's just a countdown. But still, I was still wondering what it was. And then when it turned out to be a comic book strip, I was just like, okay.
Yeah, I feel like it would have been great to get a Spider-Man 4 comic at the very least, because people know that people love this movie trilogy as a whole. But yeah, after all this, like, there's still the video games, which I'd say are great. The first one was pretty standard for the norm, movie tie-in game, but it was high quality. Same thing for the second one. I like the fact that all games had like new villains you can fight against that are similar in style to the movie trilogy. Spider-Man 2 was definitely a great way to begin the sort of like open world gameplay, which I like going back to this day just because I like exploring New York City. And even though the NPCs are cheesy as hell with like lines like, "Hey Spidey, you're the man," or "What a cheese ball," it's still great, and I like hearing Tobey Maguire's voice a lot. I wish Tobey Maguire was my like voice assistant. He makes a great like some person to talk with or hear when you're like driving or doing computer work. And the third game, I remember best playing it on a PS2. Well, it was alright. It did feel more like a somewhat less exciting version of the second game, which, quite frankly, now I see how people feel about Pac-Man World 3 compared to the second game, but whereas there was things I liked more about World 3 as much as I did World 2, there weren't as many things I liked about Spider-Man 3's game as much as I did Spider-Man 2's game, but I do think that the PS2 version is better than the PS3 version. I'm not sure. It ultimately depends on like your preference, but I know for a fact that the models at least look better than they did on the PS3 version. I remember that scene when like that lady was like saying, "I'm gonna die!" She looked hideous.
Yeah, I will say that Spider-Man 3's the game development. I don't know if it was rushed or not. I'm gonna go ahead and say yeah, it was, cause like, wowie, dude, some of those cutscenes look kind of bad.
And then after that, we get ourselves the Amazing Spider-Man Duology. At first, I was gonna hate them because I wanted Spider-Man 4, and I was just not happy with a reboot. Because, like, I was already happy with the Spider-Man trilogy, and now they just made this newer one that's gonna not be as good. It's gonna be bad, it's gonna be weak. And it turns out it was okay. I think the first movie might be the stronger one of the two, but ultimately it's one that I just can't like as much because it just feels like a weird mix between both the first storyline and it doing its own thing. I guess with it being like 10 years after the first movie, they wanted to try and do a new origin story. But I don't know, it just feels like a bit unsatisfying with the way they just didn't resolve Uncle Ben's death. With the first movie, it felt like it was to the point. It's like, all right, audience, you're gonna see like Tobey Maguire Spider-Man face off against the guy that killed Uncle Ben, and it's just great to see him go up against the killer. Whereas with Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, yeah, it didn't get to the point. It was like okay, I'm gonna try and find him, but when he found the guy, I don't think it was him anymore. It just like didn't make it feel as satisfying, but the rest of the movie is alright. Andrew Garfield's performance as Peter Parker and Spider-Man was good. He was much more hip and like younger looking than Tobey's Peter was, but to his credit, he felt more like an Ultimate Comic influence in a way, whereas Tobey Maguire felt more classic influence, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And well, we do have a green villain this time around. I like the fact that we have a different green villain this time for the reboot with Lizard. His design is admittedly not my favorite, but I understand what they're going for, as it feels a mid-transformation design. I still love Todd McFarlane's take on Lizard with a more ferocious look and the drooling mouth and a tongue that could almost rival Venom's. But unfortunately, we don't have that. But that being said, though, Kurt Connor's storyline was pretty good, and I feel like this sort of element was what was originally going to be used for Spider-Man 4. Because I know that there's going to be Vulture in the fourth movie, but I think Lizard was also one of them as well. But with him being a more, this feeling like a carryover story, because it feels both like remnants of original story arc for Spider-Man 4, recycled elements from the first movie, and new stuff with the Ultimate Comics. But now we have stuff like Gwen Stacy instead of Mary Jane, the death of Gwen Stacy's father, a police officer. At least that's what I think. And the new cast itself is, like, apart from, like, Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker, I think it was pretty alright. Granted, I know more of the main characters, like, their version of Ben Parker and Aunt May, as well as the new Gwen Stacy and Kurt Connors. They feel much more recognizable. I don't remember the secondary cast as much as I do the original trilogy, but I guess they wanted to focus more on those guys. So ultimately, the Amazing Spider-Man itself was also kind of controversial with the new suit design. It felt more like you ever see like comparisons to rainforest frogs?
No.
Like when I first saw the Amazing Spider-Man suit with like the different suit like color layout, it kind of and even the hands as well. It reminded me of like a rainforest frog, which I think almost fits well like the sort of like lizard theming with the lizard. Almost like this Spider-Man suit has a bit of like an amphibian or reptilian like coloring influence beyond just the Spider-Man elements. It might seem a little different from what people are used to, but I think it kind of gives him a bit of an identity from Tobey's Spider-Man. And that's even further added with the golden lenses, which I'll be honest, I think were cool. I still prefer the original suit design from the original trilogy, but this is a pretty good way to like make a unique Spider-Man. And ultimately, that would be different for the Amazing Spider-Man 2 when we get a more traditional looking suit design that still tries to make itself different from the Tobey Maguire suit with the bigger lenses and the more metallic colors, I guess. Now, Spider-Man 2, or the Amazing Spider-Man 2, is a movie I like to watch more often because I like the ideas for it. It's more original storyline. I just feel like the execution is just a little bit lacking in terms of content because there's a lot of stuff that's cut from this movie.
Now, my experience with the Amazing Spider-Man duology, I saw the first Amazing Spider-Man opening weekend with both my parents. Now, for me, I was definitely confused as a young child because at this time I never knew about the whole cancellation of Spider-Man 4, and so I'm just wondering, who is this new guy? And when I got out of the theater, I will say that I actually loved it. I really loved it. And then Spider-Man 2, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out, and I loved that movie as well, even though I was still a child around that time. And coming back to revisiting these films a couple of years later, they really hold up very well. Until I just found out that The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was trying to rush so many things, like Sinister Six already getting a movie after The Amazing Spider-Man 2 with like no setup at all. I can tell that they were trying to rush this whole Sony Spider-Man universe, and the fact that they're still trying to that Sony's still trying to do it with the terrible, or should I say, beautiful and definitely best-selling movie of all time, Morbius. It definitely showed that Sony was just trying to rush this whole universe thing. But going back to The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I'd still think that the movie is good despite lots of its flaws. Like Green Goblin just showing up at the end of the movie, Rhino just having like almost no screen time at all, only showing up at the first part of the movie, but with no suit, and then literally at the end with this suit. And like the fact that he was like advertised as one of the big villains, you'd think that he'd show up for the whole movie, but no, they just did it for advertisement purposes. Now for the performance, Andrew Garfield just steals the show in all of the scenes in this duology. Oh my god, he's such an amazing actor. He had so much for the character if they just gave him a good script for The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And for a movie that we will be talking about at the end, he still does an amazing job to this day. I'm hoping for the Amazing Spider-Man 3. I will pay lots of money just to see Andrew appear on the big screen because I really want him to get his third movie. He's a brilliant actor on the same level as Toby. Just give him a good script and he will do wonders on screen.
As for my thoughts on the Amazing Spider-Man 2, I gotta be honest and say that, like, once again, great ideas, just the lack of content that makes it a bit frustrating. Especially since, like, I feel like they were trying to make this movie feel like this would be the next turning point for Spider-Man movies. One that actually changed the way we see the character. And I'm not sure if it was worth it, though, because, like I said, we didn't get much of what was promised, but I do like the fact that, unlike the first movie, this one tries to stand out from its predecessors by actually having a new storyline. New villains this time around. We have Green Goblin, but he's portrayed differently. This time we have Harry Osborn being Green Goblin right away, whereas his father died. Last, in the original trilogy, it was Norman, and he was the main antagonist. Ultimately, I do find that the ideas are just, like, there, but just the execution that just felt flat. Like, I didn't get much of, like, a dynamic between Peter and Harry, nor do I get the same feeling with, like, Andrew's portrayal, like Spider-Man being, like, looked up to by someone like Max, which sucks too because, like, I feel like Max is a character that I feel like they're trying to, like, make relatable as well, but I just found him more of, like, a kind of character that just becomes a generic villain when he becomes Electro. Plus, like, him being a nerd just feels rather, like, weak all around. Hey, at least he fixed his teeth when he became Electro. His design is rather unusual, though, with him being looking like a Blue Man Group, and I'll never forget Glenn Webb's, like, comment, like, I don't know which movie I'm supposed to be watching when I observe this version of Electro. Is it The Amazing Spider-Man 2? Is it The Watchmen? Is it Batman and Robin? Because with the suit and the blue design, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be thinking about either him, or Mr. Freeze, or Dr. Manhattan. And it's funny, too, because, like, Mr. Freeze, I think, would have made more sense if he was more like a Snow White looking color for skin instead of the blue. Kind of like in the 90s animated series in a way, as they use it as, like, the standard look for the character. Plus, it doesn't help by the fact that Mr. Freeze is in that movie is just like cartoon. And Dr. Manhattan, it made sense. He was blue in the original, like, graphic novel for the Watchmen, and, like, that CGI was done very well. He looked like an actual, like, blue humanoid being. Whereas Electro just felt more like he was the Blue Man Group, but they were mixed in with dubstep. It was just not the best I've seen. And I feel like the designs for the villains this time around were just not that, like, fascinating. Not terrible, but I've seen better. I mean, at least with, like, the Lizard in the Amazing Spider-Man, you can say that's just like a mid-morphosis version of him. And then Rhino himself with the sort of, like, design that he has, like, it's a cool design. It feels like a Transformers rip-off, and with Age of Extinction released in the same year. You can tell what they're trying to mimic. And yeah, apart from all that, we also get ourselves, like, Death of Gwen Stacy, which is mostly Peter's fault because he kept getting her in trouble. But I think it's a good way to showcase him that he should always be careful what he does, because his sort of, like, obsession with trying to, like, cling onto somebody is going to last forever, and it's a pretty good way of, like, doing what the original Rift movie did, but differently when it comes to the Death of Gwen Stacy reference. Literally because, like, Mary Jane never died, and Gwen Stacy did, so they're like, oh, you guys did the opposite, because not only did your female, like, damsel in distress, like, survive, but she was the wrong character to be in a reference like that. We're gonna do that as well. We're gonna make our damsel in distress die, and she's gonna be the one that actually did die. That's not to say that the original movie got it wrong, it's just kind of funny how it worked out, because this is why, like, they're doing the opposite in the ways that do make sense for a new movie that's trying not to be like the original. So that's why I like. And of course, there was, like, Mary Jane was going to be in the movie, but she got cut out for some reason. And it sucks too, because there are things I liked about this movie, such as when Peter Parker was trying to, like, be with Gwen at times. Or how about when Peter was, like, able to stop a kid from being bullied, and he fixed up his, like, science project and took him home. Like, those were great moments. And I feel like and I also even remember the marketing for the movie, like Spider-Man getting packages for the movie tickets. Or do you remember when he was dancing with a baby version of himself in a mirror?
That's a funny commercial. And it was for Aquafina, of all things.
I don't know if it was for Aquafina or if it was a different water brand, but it was, like, just iconic. And it sucks, too, because, like, there are so many things I was looking forward to with The Amazing Spider-Man 2. It's just a shame that, like, it doesn't live up to it, mostly due to the fact that studio meddling is a problem. It's worse in The Amazing than with Spider-Man 3, because at least Spider-Man 3, the movie itself was still fairly cohesive. It's just that some things were a little bit missing for an otherwise fairly complete experience. This, however, from while like Sony was more obsessed with doing the aforementioned obsession with trying to cross over with like Sinister Six and the Venom movie and all that sort of stuff. And I get it, but this is Spider-Man we're talking about. Hold your horses, guys. You're not trying to be like BVS when you're trying to like do a different approach from Marvel with making a big superhero event, because like I don't think DC wants to do what Marvel did. That made sense. Plus, we already knew Superman and Batman by this point. So why would he do another origin story for them? With Spider-Man, though, like it feels like I just feel like they're trying to do something that BVS did, but not as well as BVS did, in my opinion, because the problem is that they were trying to make itself feel like it's just a big universe thing, but I don't think people are going to be as obsessed with a Sinister Six movie as they would be if they were the antagonists and Spider-Man was still around. I mean, sure, Venom made a lot of money, but the fact is that Venom himself is just like an evil version of Spider-Man. That's already going to make money on its own. And of course, all this sort of stuff led to, at one point, a leaked email back when North Korea hacked Sony Pictures for a movie known as The Interview, and we got details regarding something known as MCU actually having Spider-Man involved in one of the movies. And that leads us to Tom Holland's portrayal of the character.
Alright, well, Tom Holland first made his debut as Spider-Man in Captain America Civil War. I will say, I was there when the trailer first dropped, during Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards of all things. And let me just tell you, the moment I saw the web attached to Captain America's shield, snatched it from him, and then made the landing, I was just in shock. Spider-Man is finally going to be in a movie with Iron Man, Captain America, and all of the other Avengers. I was very, very excited, and I really wanted to see the movie. Unfortunately, I couldn't for reasons I have forgotten about, but I did eventually see the movie in full, and wow, I will say that this introduction for Peter in the MCU is definitely great. I will agree. Although I didn't really feel like the suit colors got to shine because of the whole Marvel movies having desaturated color, which I honestly kind of find annoying. But we did get that better in Homecoming. So yeah, Homecoming is Tom Holland's actual first Spider-Man movie in the MCU. And in my opinion, it's kind of meh for me. My opinion on it is kind of similar to Alex Hightop Film's opinion on it. It's not a good Spider-Man movie, but it is a good movie overall to just watch from time to time. And I stand by that very, very much because, yeah, like I said, it's not a good Spider-Man movie in my opinion, but it is a good movie overall. I like Michael Keaton as the villain for Vulture. It's very nice to see other movie actors from different franchises be a character that's part of another franchise. I love that very much. And seeing Michael Keaton as the Vulture is honestly a very great thing. I'm not gonna lie. He was a good villain. The characters I love very much. I love Ned with all my heart. I love Zendaya's MJ, though she does get to shine more in Far From Home. Flash Thompson is kind of a one-beat character. He has no he has no character at all aside from the douchey bully, and then like everything else, it's pretty much MCU stuff since Sony was very keen on using the Avengers and all that. It wasn't until the final act of Homecoming that I actually started seeing it as an actual Spider-Man movie because Peter loses the suit and he learns he is something without the suit. It doesn't matter if he has Tony Stark's suit or not. He can be Spider-Man without the guidance of Tony Stark. Or should I call him Iron Boy Jr., which lots of people call him. But yeah, Homecoming, it's not a good Spider-Man, but I do love the movie overall, just as a movie. I'd say it's a good start for Tom Holland's Spider-Man in the MCU, but yeah, that's all I got to say.
I feel like Spider-Man stuff in the MCU works well when he's with the other characters and when he is on his own. Because in Civil War, apart from certain things like the fact that he got his suit from Tony, and his lines are just for boiled down to one-liners, pop culture references, which is ironic because he mentions Star Wars a lot because like Marvel, Star Wars on Disney can't. But I think Peter Parker's one of the few characters that would outright say Star Wars sucks, because he said it in the comic books actually. But I think like him being in the MCU was alright when he was with the other characters, simply because it just felt much smaller and like you'd probably have some of the more somewhat tolerable characters involved. Because on his own, I can't stand Tom Holland's portrayal of the character. Like Civil War was alright, especially the hype, but I kind of lost interest in the hype in retrospect just because it felt like it was just Disney trying to reel in people to make them their consumers with double O's between S and M. And with Homecoming, it just felt like this was like, this is it? This is all they're going to do? It just feels like a high-budget Disney Channel movie with an admittedly decent cast of actors. I feel like MJ and Ned feel more like they're inspired by the Ultimate Comics characters that we'd find Miles Morales hang out with. And it's kind of funny, too, because Miles Morales being under the shadow of a legacy character is what we get with Tom Holland's Spider-Man being under the influence of Iron Man. And I get it. They're trying to make this a story about a Spider-Man that tries to stand out from like everyone else. But it just feels kind of frustrating that this guy just wants to see Tony Stark as his sugar daddy. It's like, I get it. He has no Uncle Ben. And they just have Tony Stark because it feels like everything's going to be rolling around Tony Stark. I mean, Vulture was pretty much a former employee of Tony. So it's like, okay, is this supposed to be like, is this something genuine or is this meant to be like a gag? I mean, yeah, sure, Iron Man's like iconic and all, but it's like, do they have to make everything connected to Tony Stark? Like, oh yeah, like let's make Ant-Man a former Stark employee that just got out of jail at one point because he didn't give Tony Stark his cheeseburgers. That makes sense for the MCU, right? Kevin Feige's gonna confirm that stupid ass shit. It just felt like it was irritating at this point, and I think it doubled more so with Far From Home, but we'll get to that in a moment. Vulture in Homecoming was alright. I definitely liked him as an antagonist more, especially since like he felt great and the suit design wasn't that bad. I just don't like the fact that he was a former Stark employee. Plus, with the way like he was set up in Morbius, I kind of feel like, wait a minute, he feels like he would actually fit in with the Tasman style universe better than he would MCU. Actually, it fits in alright. It's just the fact that like with the way MCU villains are just set up, you can either make them with, like, you can just retool them different ways. There's just no real identity to them. And yeah, you could say Homecoming has an identity of its own, but it just comes at the cost of trying to connect all the MCU and Avengers stuff, just because Disney doesn't want this Spider-Man to be separated from the MCU in case Sony bails out of the deal. And that especially is true when it comes to stuff like the way certain details are portrayed for the next film, but we'll get into that in a moment because for Infinity War, he just made movie references and did a few cool scenes of Billy, but it always like do something that I noticed was infuriating with the character, that being identify himself as, hey, Peter Parker, oh, I'm Spider-Man, never mind. We're using our different names. But apart from all that stuff, like, you probably also know him best for getting dusted as one of the victims during Infinity War. I get it, people are trying to make it sort of like emotional thing. It was like, oh, Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good. I don't want to go. It just feels like another reminder that once again, they're trying so hard to connect this to Iron Man that it's just going to be impossible to make him stand out on his own. And, like, I understand the concept. It just feels kind of cynical in a way with the rights thing, don't you think?
Yeah, I will agree on that.
And it's funny too because this was done in the same year we got ourselves other stuff like the aforementioned Spider-Man video game from Insomniac, as well as the Venom movie, which we gotta talk about that right now. Honestly, like, the Venom stuff and the Sony universe of Marvel characters isn't perfect by any stretch of imagination. But one thing we'll say is that Venom at least gave me something I always wanted. A solid action movie that, well, isn't going to be perfect, at least it didn't try to make itself bigger than it really is or have any more attention as any right to, like the MCU. And in addition to just giving us a much more, like, outstanding, like, characters. I mean, I feel like the MCU just makes its protagonist more or less the same. A somewhat likable character that can be a bit snarky or a bit of a prick and does everything that every other Marvel hero's done at the end. So, to have Eddie Brock and Venom just be like these sort of like unusual duo with Eddie Brock just becoming more and more looking like a piece of shit throughout the movie with the same outfit on him and more like just gets like crazy like behavior on him is just a breath of fresh air if you ask me. And who can forget just how Venom works in the movie? Like, his voice, his design, his portrayal is just much better in Spider-Man 3 because I feel like in Spider-Man 3, the symbiote wasn't really trying to make Venom like something or just because they wanted to make it like this animate object that just represents what Peter would become had he really fond of the symbiote, whereas it feels like Venom is an actual character in the story. Not something like a virus, if that makes sense. And while people were probably expecting a more horror-driven story, I will say that this actually is not too bad for what it is. And even like the Venom song from Eminem is okay. It's kind of hard to rap because of just how fast he goes. I mean, I can't sing all of it, and Eminem's a fast rapper.
So for Venom, when I learned that this was gonna be apart from Spider-Man, I was just like, okay, I do like Venom, so I might as well go see it. And I saw it in the theater with my mom opening night, and I will say that it's good. Definitely not bad. It's just that I like the sequel more, which we will be getting into. Riot was kind of a weird choice, especially since I never heard of them before. So like, then again, that's what a sequel does better. I like Dan. Anne is good as well, but obviously, you know, the stars Eddie and Venom. I like Tom Hardy's portrayal as Eddie. Venom is good. Venom is a cool character as well. You know, since his origins doesn't come from Spider-Man, it does feel off without the, you know, huge symbol on his front chest. Almost makes him look like an original monster in a way, I know this is Venom. It's just that, you know, it's different without the spider logo, or well, the corrupt Spider-Man logo. But yeah, Venom is a good movie. Definitely not bad. Yeah, that's all I got to say on it.
As for Let There Be Carnage, I will say that there are things I like about it more than the first one, but there are things I like about the first one more. For example, I like Carnage this time around compared to Riot, especially with Cletus Cassidy's portrayal, and in addition to the fact that we get Shriek involved. I like how even if those two are like a perfect couple, there's still a bit of like this crazy ass love triangle that involves the Carnage symbiote and Cletus and Shriek that Venom and Eddie Brock take advantage of. I also like the fact that we get to see just the way we get more of like a romance between Venom and Eddie that's developed over time, even if it's more romantic in some areas. Which, I'll be honest, I kind of think that if you're going to make an already established character gay for someone else, like, you could probably just do Venom with like Eddie Brock, that'll be fine because they were made for each other, and they are Venom. But I have to be honest here that the shorter duration of the movie is nothing too special, and I feel like there's a lot of stuff that was cut out from the movie to try and like make it feel like it's a bigger horror project. It just feels much softer in a way. I feel like as a result of the pandemic, that Sony wanted to try and like be a little less risk-taking with this movie. But at the very least, it didn't flop at the box office. It was still a success. Granted, not as successful as the first movie, but it still did a lot of money nonetheless. And at the very least, it did get people excited for No Way Home. That we saw like Venom wanting to get involved in the Peter Parker hate train. Not as much as we anticipated though, because of course they would.
As for me, Let There Be Carnage is definitely better than the first movie in my opinion. Carnage is excellent. The jail breakout scene, best scene in the movie. Not gonna lie. The whole arguing with Eddie and Venom. That was a cute little mini story, I guess. And also when they joined back as well.
Both, I mean, I do feel like with Venom, at least you get a sense that there's a lot of money that can be made, and there's a lot of people for Venom. Morbius, though, I mean, he's the movie of all time. He made more $1 billion, but I'm sorry, he ain't no Venom. But if there's one thing that Sony's done post-Hasm 2 that I like the most, it's gotta be Into the Spider-Verse. Oh man, Into the Spider-Verse is just such a unique experience all around. Not just for Marvel films, and not just for Spider-Man, but for Marvel movies and even animated films as well. Because I feel like when there's an animated movie that's based on like a superhero property, it feels like it's going that's theatrical release, not direct to video. I feel like it's just going to be like something you're just going to find for like comedy, like Lego Batman or DC Super Pets. Now they're going to have to with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. While it may seem like a kiddie movie at first, there's a lot more going on to it than meets the eye. Miles Morales' story is the best we've seen, in my opinion, when it comes to this version of the character, because he's going to be with another Spider-Man that's actually like different than the one he's looked up to all these years. He's got all this weight to him that he's going to get help on, while also helping another Spider-Man, Peter Parker, get back on his own weight. They're joined up with the likes of Spider-Gwen, we also got ourselves Spider-Man Noir, who was portrayed by Nicolas Cage, an unexpected surprise, and it's funny seeing how introduced in the Marvel movie, as well as the DC movie, which can kind of go to the movies as Superman, in reference to the cancer Superman Lives. And there's also, like, Penny Parker, who's got an anime influence to her. She pilots the SPDR droid, which I still want to get a Marvel Legends version of, because I already got 4 of them at first. And who can forget Spider-Ham? A great way of reinterpreting like the Spider-Man, like Spider-Ham design from like Animals version of Marvel Heroes. That's my favorite version of the character because apart from like the Raimi trilogy and Scott Johnson eye lenses on him, his design just like shows so much character to him. Like he's literally animated in terms of personality. And who can forget when he uses a hammer against one of the villains? It's just great.
Yeah, Into the Spider-Verse is definitely one of the greater Spider-Man movies. Just for the animation overall. And the idea of having Miles having like a very, very smaller frame rate than everybody else, and the moment he becomes Spider-Man, it matches with the rest of the movie, and that is just amazing, especially the whole leap of faith. That scene right there is cinema. I'm not gonna lie, that is cinema right there. And for some people thinking that Miles jumps off the window because he's already Spider-Man, I disagree on that. He actually jumps. The moment he jumps, before that, he was still clinging on. He was still scared on what will happen, and that was when he took the leap of faith. And then the glass shattering is when he was still sticking on. He just jumped. He just did a leap of faith, and And that's the moment that he becomes Spider-Man. It was that leap of faith, still clinging onto the window, doing the leap of faith, and then boom, there he goes. So yeah, Into the Spider-Verse, it's just a beautiful film, and I will say that aside from another movie that we'll be getting into after Far From Home, is a very big love letter to everything Spider-Man.
And I'll argue by saying that compared to the other movie we'll talk about that's also a love letter, this one feels like it's a love letter on purpose. I look forward to seeing Across the Spider-Verse. I hope it's as good as the first movie, if not better, because this movie just deserves a lot of praise. I'm disappointed it didn't do so much in the box office because people just think cartoon equals bad, unless it's anime for some reason. Oh wait, I forgot perverted stuff and whatnot, but yeah, at the very least, Spider-Verse got the last laugh compared to all the anime Disney movies that came out in 2018 because it got an Oscar. And seeing like the legacy to Stan Lee, which, you know, after seeing like hearing Stan Lee passed away back in 2018 was felt painful to listen to because like he was this guy that you thought would never be gone for so long, but just hearing that he passed away was just sad to hear, especially since he created some of our heroes of all time. But seeing him in Spider-Verse post his death, as well as seeing his tribute message and his glasses, in addition to an image of Peter, Gwen, and Miles all coming together to celebrate the Oscar that they won, was just beautiful. It can make a man cry. It's something that I don't think we'll ever see with like the MCU, because I feel like in comparison, the MCU just feels much more factory made. Whereas this feels like it was made from the heart, and I hope the same could be said for Across the Spider-Verse. And hopefully we get to see like how we'll find out what happens to 2099 after he deals with like the pointing wars with Earth 67 Spidey.
To quote Stan Lee from Spider-Man 3, one person can make a difference. Enough said.
Yep. And plenty of different people made a difference in this case. Miles Morales made a difference. Peter B. Parker made a difference. All the other characters made a difference. Pretty much, it just showcases that one movie like this can make a difference compared to what we've seen before. And I do hope that we get this, because I feel like we're not going to get anything like Spider-Verse after what we saw with animated movies that just feel like they're either Pixar quality or they're going to be made in the same style as Minions or whatever forgettable stuff gets put out with the same type of humor. And unfortunately, my love for Spider-Verse is heavily contrasted next to Far From Home, because I feel like Far From Home is when a movie gets, or the MCU interpretation becomes frustrating for me. At least with Homecoming, you got like a pretty decent villain and a pretty good reason to root for Peter to an extent, even if I don't agree with it. Whereas here it feels like they were trying so hard to get the MCU like injections put in there as much as they can to try and prevent Sony from using Spider-Man on his own. Between the fact that this was set after the events of Avengers Endgame, we get stuff like Peter Parker trying to like get out of the shadow of like Iron Man. It's like, oh, everywhere I go I see your face, and the fact that there's a chance he's going to take over the role of Iron Man. It just seems like it just seems pretty like irritating overall. I just couldn't stand it, and it just felt like it was a big middle finger to Spider-Man fans that even if they were able to give the MCU a shot because they like Marvel stuff, they would probably be upset about how this turned out. Like, I remember a former friend of mine was upset about Far From Home because, not because it wasn't Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, but because it just felt more like the opposite of what he would want Spider-Man to be.
Yeah, for what I think on Far From Home, it's definitely debatable. I actually love Far From Home more than Homecoming, but yeah, that doesn't mean that I'm saying that the flaws and all the arguments about the movie aren't real. Like, I see them, and oh boy, are they terrible. But in my opinion, I think the good in this movie overshadows the bad, because like the action is just wow. like very amazing. The CGI, some is I could say overused and not required in some spaces, but it's still really good for when it should be there. I very, very love the romantic relationship between Tom Holland's Peter and Zendaya's MJ. Like, I love it very much. You know, these two are cute together. Yeah, like, yeah. From Home has its issues, and yeah, I'm not gonna say that they don't exist. But yeah, it's just that in my opinion, it's just the best movie than Homecoming. But yeah, Mysterio being a former Stark employee, I was just like, oh my god, not this again.
Yeah.
And this one is way more.
It's worse.
Worse.
Even worse than with Vulture. Because, like, the thing about Mysterio is that he's a guy that was like a failed VFX artist from movies, right? And they said, okay, let's just use him, let's try and make him cooler, but the fact that we gotta make him a friggin' like former Stark employee, like, on his own, if he was the way he was, maybe less technological obsessed, I'd probably like him a little bit more. But the fact that he's got the Tony Stark influence onto him, and Peter Parker's already dick writing the Avengers and Tony Stark legacy, just like, it just feels like it's just beating into your head, being like, look, it's an MCU movie, this is an MCU movie, like, this is different, all, you know, it's like, alright, Marvel, shut up already. Jesus fucking Christ, it's already bad enough that these, like, fuckers are just getting box office wins constantly, letting the other competition drown. And it's already bad enough we gotta deal with, like, a lot of crap regarding, like, them buying stuff, but it just feels like they're just beating you into your head with, like, all this, like, connections and all that. It just... God, it's so irritating. And I think the scene that like pissed me off the most was when Spider-Man saw the zombie Iron Man. Like, I just wanted to like throw my popcorn at the screen and hope it would like tear it apart somehow. Because it'd be one thing if he would say that he failed to save everyone else, and that includes like the Avengers. But the fact that it's always a case of like, oh, you failed Tony Stark, I guess you didn't dick write him enough, you stupid fuck. And like, it just becomes like this like mind-boggling irritation that they just kept on presenting. Thankfully, like, Nick Fury was a little more interesting of like a mentor guy, or at least somebody that could help him out. But man, 2019 was a rough year for Nick Fury. I mean, first of all, he got an embarrassing origin story for his eye patch in Captain Marvel, and now it turns out that Nick Fury was off-world. It's like, it's a slap in the face of people that aren't MCU consumers, don't you think?
I will definitely agree, yeah.
And the funniest thing is that Peter Parker won't shut up about his identity. I mean, in Homecoming, like, I guess it was meant to be funny, but when he revealed his identity, when he accidentally found, when Mary Jane found out he was Spider-Man, it's like, is this supposed to be a joke? Like, am I supposed to find it funny? It seems like more like something I'd probably find from a stupid-ass TikTok video. And look what happened. He thought like he was giving away his identity, like as if he was giving away free candy. And look what happened. Mysterio doxed him at the end of Far From Home.
Yeah, that is a very accurate depiction of the post-credit scene.
Yes.
This post-credit scene is definitely important because even though this was the movie that led to the whole Sony versus Disney debacle on the rights, it did leave the door for the next Spider-Man movie. And now, while it was going to be at first a Kraven the Hunter movie, something was starting to take form. The form of Spider-Verse, he'd say.
But we'll get into that in a moment because there's still stuff I gotta say about Far From Home.
Alright, shoot.
Okay, so like we already know about the fact that Spider-Man just couldn't shut up about his identity, and he and it bit him in the ass, right? And so
Yeah.
like, and of course like we get J.K. Simmons returning. But 2019 was like a major contrast compared to 2018 because there's a lot of stuff that made you excited for Spider-Man media, right? Here just felt like it was just slap in the face after slap in the face.
Yeah, because the PS4 game came out like a year before Far From Home.
And like at that point, we started to realize that like more of an audience started to realize that like unless you're an MCU consumer or Tom Holland fangirl, like you'd at least like be aware of the fact that stuff like the Insomniac games did a much more interesting story. Because we don't need Peter Parker to be a teenager all the time. We can put him in a different time period or like age, and the story would be good, if not even better, much better than what I'd say with the MCU stuff. Because A, it's something original. B, it's much better handled, and C, it feels like it's like a proper Spider-Man story instead of just Spider-Man dick riding the Avengers. And I remember seeing this post when someone said like, "Oh, there's Iron Man, Spider-Man standing next to each other," and then they try to throw shit at the MCU haters, like the Holland the Holland critics. The difference is that in a lot of other Spider-Man media, it's just Iron Man and Spider-Man just being allies. That's the only thing they have in common, just being like teammates. It's the MCU that just pushes the Iron Man Jr. philosophy, and the fact that people like Kevin Feige thought, yeah, you guys talked about like that kid in Iron Man 2 with the helmet. It's him. It's like, shut the fuck up, man. Like, I respect you for running out to make money, but if you're gonna bring up stuff like that and say he has like a serious connection or confirmation, then you just gotta like shut the fuck up for an hour or so. Like, that's the kind of thing that irritates me. It's like it's some throwaway ass detail they try to make a big deal about. It's like, who fucking cares? And it felt satisfying when we saw like Sony like abandon Disney for a few months with the Spider-Man rights. And people were like, oh my god, Spider-Man! Oh, he's gonna not like be in the MCU! And Disney's like, okay guys, alright, our consumers, like, you must attack Sony and make sure that they get the Spider-Man rights back to us, or else we're going to like not even give you your products anymore, even though you're already going to be our loyal consumers. It just showcased the fact that people were attacking certain fan bases, but they were willing to defend the MCU fans for their hostile attacks towards Sony. And while I will say that the movie that we got afterwards was pretty solid, I don't think it was worth that disgusting behavior that fans depicted with attacking Sony just because they wanted more money than they were getting, or like Disney wanted more money from the box office than they already deserved. And you know that scene from SpongeBob when Patrick Star was like, you took away my one source of food, now I'm gonna starve.
Yeah, that's accurate to the whole thing with this.
Yep. And it's kind of funny too because I was looking forward to see how they'll handle Spider-Man on his own. Maybe they would have written Tom Holland better, but I digress. But after all this stuff, we now get to No Way Home, and I was like, and then you pretty much invited me over because it was like a free showing for me because like there was nothing else for me to do, and I thought, okay, I'll tag along with you to watch the movie.
Yeah, I just wanted to see the new Spider-Man movie because, well, now for a little history, this movie definitely had the most leaks to any movie possible, and a lot of anticipation, because what started off from Jamie Foxx saying that he's returning as Electro in the next Spider-Man movie, but also showing the 3 Spider-Men in an Instagram post. Oh boy, did this movie start to become the next hot thing. No Way Home was set to be one of the biggest Spider-Man movies of all time. And some people even saying that it was going to be bigger than Spider-Verse, which, not a chance. Well, depends on if Sony is actually going to do a good job with this. But, yeah, I was there for No Way Home ever since that Instagram post. And I was just wondering, oh my goodness, will Tobey and Andrew return? And if they do, wow, is this gonna be a movie? So yeah, all the leaks, all the rumors, led to this moment on December 7th, and now we are like lots of people are getting excited for the re-release with the new added scenes, which in my opinion is kind of a douche move from Sony because at the last minute of the DVD and Blu-ray release, they took away the deleted scenes. And I'm pretty sure this is what they're doing with the new re-release, just for more money at the box office, which yeah is kind of a douche move. And like I still have my receipt from getting the copy at Walmart, so that way if they ever do something like, hey, bring back your copy and we'll get you the actual new one with the deleted scenes.
Trust me, so long
But
as it's
going back,
nothing like that scene of the Hulk in Endgame where it's fakes with like unfinished CGI and he's grabbing a phone. If it's better than that, I'll give them props.
yeah. So, um, so yeah, the with the movie coming back to theaters, I'd say it was definitely a good time to talk about Spider-Man and bring it all the way full circle to this very moment with Spider-Man No Way Home. And when we saw it, yeah, I'd say that the first half hour of the movie to like the whole hour, it was still just MCU stuff. But like this was after Far From Home, so they still had to talk about the whole Mysterio thing, revealing Spider-Man's identity. Um, and I will say that the first act was actually kind of fun. I'm not gonna lie. Peter and MJ running away from the people after they find out that Peter's Spider-Man, and them thinking that he killed Mysterio. And yeah, like it really shows just what people could think if the internet, if you believe the internet a lot, you could be told lots of lies. And yeah, learning about that learning with Peter that Nick Fury was gone for like probably I think 3 years, 3 months, I'm pretty sure. Um, and then everyone just being held with damage control, and then this leads to the whole college issue with Peter and Co. Seeing how anybody who knows Peter Parker just can't go to college. And wow, this did I feel that honestly? I honestly kind of felt that. Uh, and of course, knowing that this was the MCU Spider-Man, obviously he's gonna be turning to someone we know from the MCU, that being Mr. Doctor Stephen Strange.
But before then, we
And
got a cameo from Matt Murdock, who is a pretty good lawyer. I will admit it sucked to be in see him suit up, but hey, at least She-Hulk is fixing that sort of issue, and even if it's the yellow suit, he still looks better than She-Hulk's crappy CGI. But yeah, Doctor Strange gets the main focus, and go ahead, tell your thoughts about Doctor Strange.
honestly, Doctor Strange in this movie was kind of botched, I'm not gonna lie. Because like I love this solo movie very much. I love this performance in both Infinity War and Endgame. And then No Way Home just comes in and he's like, "Hey, you want to see a little worse version than Doctor Stephen Strange? No, too bad. Here you go." And and it kind of reminds me of how he was in the first movie. You know, he he doesn't even think about what could happen. He just does it. Even Wong tells him not to perform the spell, the runes of Kafka. Yes, I'm saying Kafka, like cough drop. Marvel MCU fans and Marvel comic book fans, I don't care how you want me to say it, I'm calling it Kafka. So yeah, Kafka. That's the spell that he does. And so that this starts the whole multiverse roundup, and I will say at this moment, this is when No Way Home starts to become better than both Homecoming and Far From Home. Peter is sent by Strange away from the his old house.
The Sanctum Sanctorum.
Yes. I actually got it or something.
Yeah.
But
apart from all that,
yeah,
though.
Peter then calls. Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Apart from all that, though, like, we start to see the movie actually build up because apart from the Daredevil cameo, most of the stuff was more or less just like typical MCU humor. Granted, it wasn't as bad as previous movies, but it was still there. And of course, once the movie started to pick up the moment we saw the older villains, seeing Dr. Octopus take the spotlight was actually pretty cool to see because he's an actual character, whereas most of the MCU villains, apart from the main ones like Loki and Thanos, were pretty much like just one-off guys. Sure, you can see the same about Doc Ock, but he feels more like he's an actual character, not just the villain of the movie. And it was cool to see that spider tentacles actually get into use again. I know people would have preferred if they were CGI, not always CGI, if they had the practical prop versions, but to their credit, the CGI claws do make sense. It's not like you're imposing a character in a different setting like we saw with freaking Flash Thompson at one point. And it was great to see Alfred Molina's performance in this movie because he felt like an actual character, as mentioned before, but more so the fact that he was also reacting to this different world. Him taking on against another Spider-Man and him having memories of what happened beforehand showcased the fact that this is the same one we saw back in 2004 when we last saw him being drowned and drowning and getting sucked into the sun at the end of the movie. It was great to see him pop up. We also got to see other villains as well, like the Green Goblin, who popped up at one point. Although we didn't get to see him right away, he disappeared and eventually would show up being paranoid about his current state, with the voices still lingering inside him, to the point where he had to damage his helmet and just run away. Now, is it me, or did the suit look worse in the still images and in the DVD releases more than they did in theaters?
About that. The movies, they were rushed. So they had to do everything they can to put it all together. To the points where some scenes, which we'll get into, just don't look good at all. Now, I didn't notice them in theaters, and I don't know if you noticed them in theaters. But yeah, later on when images started floating around the internet from taken from the theaters, they were bad, really, really bad. But I did feel I didn't feel like Willem Dafoe was in the costume at all. I don't know. I think it was because of how the suit looked. But when I first saw it, I was like, this doesn't look like the suit at all. This looks more like a CGI suit, But that's practical MCU stuff.
After that, we got to see Lizard get captured, which I don't think we got too much of an interaction with beforehand. But we did see Electro pop in, and the fact we got to see him yellow this time, which I think works well for him, since he actually doesn't look I don't know, Yellow Lightning just comes off as a bit weird in live action. It just kind of looks like pee, but it works well for Electro. It looks better on him than the blue. Plus, it makes for the perfect contrasting point compared to the red and blue of Spider-Man. And Jamie Foxx gets a major facelift as Electro this time around. He looks great, although his current state of just popping in the MCU world and then being naked is still kind of awkward. But at least it's nothing too terrible like Thor Ragnarok's humor or Guardians 2's humor. Apart from that, however, we also got another antagonist this time around in the form of Sandman, who was like still a more sympathetic sided guy who, alright, like I feel like Lizard's the kind of character you just like use as a powerhouse. Doc Ock's the kind of guy that it seems like the least corrupt. Sandman is the kind of guy that just comes along with stuff because he doesn't feel like he like wants to, like, he doesn't think he's gonna be lost no more at any point, so he just rolls with it and like goes through the motions. And then like Electro feels like the kind of guy that's like no nonsense, and Green Goblin's a more manipulative type of villain. It just sucks that the fact that most of the MCU villains are just one-dimensional, been there, done that guys, whereas these characters actually feel like actual characters and not just bad guys. Especially with like,
they definitely carried the film.
Yeah, I mean, like I was alright with like with some of the other characters that were already in the MCU, but I just felt like they were like less interesting than the villains. But I will say the moment the movie got better for me was the moment Peter Parker fought against the Green Goblin. The spider sense went off, and the battle was so severe it actually made Aunt May a victim of the incident, and she dies in his hands, and the whole world's after Spider-Man. And it's even like cool to see like J. Jonah Jameson in the screen on the electric billboard, like accusing Spider-Man of what he's done. Almost like he's like a sergeant that's blaming the man for what damage he's done, and like he's right there blaming him and making him guilty of what's happened. It's just great.
And again, an action that results in a consequence. The fact that Peter did not decide to listen to Strange, that action led to the consequence of the Goblin returning and thus getting Aunt May killed.
Yeah,
and of course he delivers the iconic line. However, not the version from Uncle Ben, but the original line from the comics. With great power, there must also come great responsibility. Definitely a full.
Oh, and I also gotta say, I don't mind the fact that Strange is in this movie because at least he's not trying to be like Tony Stark or Nick Fury, where they just try to act like sugar daddies. I feel like as we go along, the MCU characters become less and less sugar daddies and more like their own guys. And I did like the fact that Peter Parker was going against Doctor Strange's approaches, especially since it resulted in Peter Parker finally learning his lessons about what happens with the aforementioned consequences. Like, all this sort of stuff about revealing your identity got you to this point, Peter. See what happens when stuff bites you in the ass? Little punk boy. And thankfully, like, at least now he's like realizing it, and he's just like fucked up at this point. He's no longer going to be like the sort of guys like, whoopsie daisy, my Aunt May's dead. Oh darn, that was not good. And he's like, oh no, what have I done? Oh man, I'm so fucked up now. Everyone hates me. My aunt's dead. Man, I'm just, it's over for me. And it's described as a tragedy. I mean, what else can I call it? One more needs to be said. The damage, destruction, and you saw with your own eyes, Antonio. Like, when will people wake up and realize that everywhere Spider-Man goes, chaos and calamity ensue? Everything he touches comes to ruin, and we, the viewers, are left to just watch the innocents pick up the pieces.
Yeah, and this was definitely the lowest part of the movie. Not by, it being bad, but like the stakes are very high. These villains are on the loose. Peter is at his lowest. Aunt May is dead. Happy is arrested. It seems like there's nobody that's gonna be able to stop these villains if Peter is on the all-time low. That's when Ned decides to open up the portal after realizing he can. And, oh man, when I first saw this in theaters, when Ned opened the portal and there was a figure down an alleyway, I knew the figure. And sure enough, my heart started pounding so fast. And I said to myself, oh my god, they did it.
Yes.
Ned and MJ call for Peter, But it's not their Peter.
It's the original.
Andrew Spider-Man.
It's
Wow.
it was like I'll admit I was nervous because knowing the MCU when it comes to handling things that are majorly anticipated, but then like dropping a ball and making it a joke. I was ready for them to make a scene where they just like abandoned them and just like, nope, never mind. And they just like write it off as a funny gag. Ha ha ha, fooled your audience. But no, they actually respectfully brought in the characters. They knew for a fact that these characters were well loved, established by many as part of their childhoods or like their legacy. And while 2017 we would have wished they outright replaced Tom Holland's Spidey, I like the fact that they're willing to help him out. They know for a fact that he's in the lowest point possible, and they think, okay, we're gonna help you out, we're gonna help you like undo this mess, and we're gonna do it together. It was great to see the two Spider-Men talking with him at the school rooftop, and then finding a way to make a cure, talking about their own stuff. But it's not like, oh hey, reference, oh nice reference, here's my reference. It's more natural. It's like, oh yeah, I had a best friend too. He died in my arms. It felt like something they would actually say, as if they were real characters and not a wiki page. I'll give them praise for that. That was great. And it's certainly much better done than most Star Wars media's handling of characters. Isn't that right, sequel trilogy?
But yeah, Tobey's return as Spider-Man. Oh my, the 9-year-old inside me was squealing with happiness. And since my mom was there in the theater as well, I wasn't next to her unfortunately, but I just know for a fact that she was probably crying tears of joy to see it. Definitely the best interpretation of Spider-Man back on screen after over a decade. Wow, that's a moment that we are never going to get back. I don't think we're ever going to be able to get that back when if we are able to see the return in theaters. But yeah, like you said, the characters were handled like they were in the original. You know, they're not being used as a joke in unnecessary spots. They actually, reference the movies when it's a serious tone, and yes, it is a serious tone. When Ned asks Tobey about if he has a friend, that's when they actually have to reference the fact that Harry died, and then there's the whole conversation with Tobey and Andrew, which I love very much.
Yeah.
And Andrew asks Tobey, it's actually the other way. Tobey asks Andrew if he has someone, and Andrew says, "No, I don't have time for Peter Parker stuff." And then he says, "Do you have someone?" And of course, Tobey says, "Yeah." Him and NJ were able to work things out, and I honestly think that they had a child at that point. Not much detail was given, but I will go ahead and say that they did have a kid. And honestly, that conversation is just one of the many moments that shows the people's view on these actors' version of Spider-Man. Tobey has a life as Peter Parker, showing that he is actually the perfect Peter Parker, while Andrew doesn't have somebody and is only doing Spider-Man stuff. He doesn't have time for Peter Parker stuff. Shows that he is actually the perfect Spider-Man. That's what I love. That's what I love very much about it.
And yeah, they did reference a lot of stuff. I mean, like, there was a lot of lines that were easy to put in. And maybe, like, some people argue missed opportunities for lines, I'm something of a scientist myself, like, that was easy. They were just like, oh, you were dead at that point, Norman. And, of course, talking about, like, their past and whatnot. Like, but it was handled pretty well. I mean, some stuff was there for, like, humor reasons, like the scientist line, but the rest of it was just handled nicely. It feels like I'm not even watching an MCU movie anymore. It feels like I'm just watching a Spider-Man movie that has an MCU character in it. Like, that's great. And that's some praise I never thought I'd give this movie. especially the final battle too, where we see the three of them working together. You know, like just seeing them actually like work things out and make the most out of their own abilities and whatnot, as well as securing the villains, was just fantastic. Even the small talk that we got, like Doc Ock saying, "Oh, like how are things going?" and Peter says, "A little bit better," or something along those lines.
Trying to do better.
Yeah, trying to do better.
The director.
Or
No.
Or-
Reference from their first meeting in Spider-Man 2.
Yep.
I love that very much.
yeah, and of course, like there's also like poor Max, who wishes there was like who wished Spider-Man was black, and luckily for him, Miles exists somewhere out there. Toby telling Sandman, "It's okay, Flint. We'll get you home," with a little bit of the theme song playing in the background. That was great. And that felt like beautiful. It felt heartwarming. I feel like this is Spider-Man to me. Like he made like some people he's a quipping guy, but at the same time he's also a nice person as well, willing to save people that don't want to be bad anymore. And it was also like great to see like Sandman return. It was also great to see the Lizard return. Admittedly, like both he and Flint were archive footage. That's okay. At least we got to see the performances and they weren't recast. But the Green Goblin stuff was once again dynamic because he was like and he was just like a friggin' like trump card in this case with how unpredictable he was.
He was an actual threat in this movie. Like he's the main villain of this movie.
Yep. And of course, like with him throwing a bomb inside the box that Doctor Strange had, which also results in the explosion and bringing out the multiverse stuff, and even damaging like the shield from the Statue of Liberty. Which, thank God, I'm pretty sure like our shitty movie details on Reddit would probably be like, "Oh, an Spider-Man No Way Home, the Captain America shield comes off the Statue of Liberty." This is in reference to the fact that Spider-Man's no longer a bitch boy for the Avengers. Which is true though, because like this is when the moment he becomes like Spider-Man. He's not just like an Avengers fanboy anymore. And it was also like unexpected to see him beat the shit out of like the Green Goblin in a fight and nearly killing him before Toby's Spidey told him not to. And he didn't like tell him to stop, don't do that. He just like went up to the glider and prevented him from getting stabbed. And like I was shocked and ready to hate the movie when like Toby Spidey got stabbed. But no, he survived. He shrugged off the stab. He survived getting stabbed in Spider-Man 3. He can survive this stab as well.
Yeah, but of course, before all of that, Andrew had his redemption. And oh my God, was I crying inside. I was crying inside my soul. Oh my goodness. This boy needs his third movie now, what I thought. He needs his third movie after this. He deserves it.
Yes. Him saving MJ from the fall was just great. And it felt like a great way to conclude on something without it just being like, oh, here's a reference to that. No. This is actually a great way of actually redeeming him. It's just a way to showcase that he no longer has this guilt and he's now free of the burden that he once had. And that makes me proud of him. And I'm also happy to see both he and Peter like react to the fact that Tom Holland is now redeeming himself and he no longer lets the Green Goblin die. He lets him get cured. All the bad guys are cured. Doctor Strange is able to resolve stuff, and Peter Parker is willing to like give up everything of his everyone else's memories to let things be normal for him. So Doctor Strange went along with it.
That hit hard for me, honestly, because through all these movies that Peter was in, he's had all his friends and family members, and now he is willing, for the safety of everyone, to just let everyone forget who he is. And yeah, that was definitely the best decision that Tom Holland's Spider-Man ever made in this trilogy of movies. This is Spider-Man. He is Spider-Man finally.
And
he is willing to do what is best for everybody.
I just hope that from here he's willing to like not put them in any more danger than they've already been in. And now that he's got his own suit, now that everyone's back home, whatever happens, I just hope Sony and Disney and Marvel do something good, because after the first 2 mediocre chapters, this feels like this is it. And if we don't do another crossover movie, I just hope they do something good for the character. You can still make him do quippy jokes, but just don't make him stupid. I want to take this Spider-Man seriously, as much as I do with the other ones, and I hope we get that. But regardless of like the journey, regardless of like the nostalgia, or just the growing appreciation for the amazing duology, like, one thing I always appreciate is the fact that Tom, Andrew, and Tobey all love the role. And some people argue they did it for the money, or one did love them more than the other, but like, they value this role of Spider-Man. They've done this together, and it's just a beautiful sight to see these guys team up, especially after like the sort of hatred towards the MCU that I had for a while. And while I don't think this 100% like redeems Disney for like the disgusting behavior that their fanboys and cultists did with towards Sony, it does like make me value what I love about Spider-Man, that being like the importance of the character, the legacy that he's got, and the excitement of seeing the three of them together in person in theaters. It's just a thing I don't think they're ever going to do again. And regardless of whether or not you love Tobey, you love Andrew, or you love Holland, none of them will have the same level of notoriety that we've gotten with another project of Spider-Man that's not even affiliated with Disney or Marvel or Sony, that being Spider-Man Lotus.
Oh man. Oh my god. Now, this is definitely something that just came out of nowhere. Well, when the whole controversy started. Now, for any people who don't know, Spider-Man Lotus was set to be a fan film, and boy was it looking amazing. CGI web slinging, a role of Spider-Man having to deal with the death of Gwen Stacy, and just visiting a sick child, telling him everything how it is to be Spider-Man, and him learning along the way himself just what it needs to be to fully be, Spider-Man. This movie was set to be one of the greatest fan films that has to be related to Spider-Man. And the fact that it was getting a full Blu-ray release, I was full on it. Like, I was excited. Now, I didn't put any money, unfortunately. Or should I say, fortunately.
In retrospect.
Yeah. Because what happened next was, oh man, wow. was this revelation just not only shocking, but also unintentionally funny to me? Because for what happened, the director and an actor for Peter Parker and Spider-Man turned out to be a very, very big racist. And oh wow, oh god. And I'm pretty sure there's more to this that I know you know more about. So yeah, please take it away with this movie that just flipped over because of just what happened.
Yeah, the fact that like initially it was an issue with like Gavin and friends pretty much talking about they're not, like, the staff is not being well paid. I mean, like, bitch, you are getting all the money necessary to fund the movie. You should pay your staff members. Like, I don't care how big or small a role a person like that does VFX or storyboard artists do, because they're a part of the movie crew. They're not just somebody that gets you like a coffee from Starbucks. No, they're people that are going to help shape the movie, mold it into what you want it to be. The fact that you're underpaying them is already bad enough, but the fact that you use the N-word on it, a racial slur, that's even worse, buddy. And it doesn't stop there, because you use it multiple times, and so did the Spider-Man actor. And it's just like, oh my god. And the excuse that he had was like, I grew up in a different racial group. I wasn't in a racist group. Like, my friends were KKK lovers, and I'm sorry for that. Please forgive me, Ulu. I was like, no, dude. You weren't apologizing because you realized it was bad. You apologized because you got caught. That dude sounds like all the predators from To Catch a Predator when they're like, oh, I'm sorry, like, this is my first time, I won't do it again. when they get caught by Chris Hansen for trying to like score a date with like a 13-year-old. Like, that's just like, that's not how you apologize. And the funny thing is the fact that like scenes were being leaked from the movie, showcasing just how bad the production was going to be. The fight between Spider-Man and Green Goblin was like lousy. It's just like I feel like it sucks too, because the people that were involved with the movie probably did all they can, even in spite of having a shitty boss like Gavin. But the fact that like they got exposed for being actual dicks, not paying staff members, and being racist is just wow. So that's where I started to have a bit of appreciation for Tom Holland's Spider-Man, because like I don't want to say anything that'll be jinxed, but I don't think either he nor Toby nor Andrew would be in anything that's beyond like typical fan preferences, because I don't think they're going to be in the same level of controversy or notoriety that Gavin and his movie star are going to be in, considering the fact that like Gavin's actually a narcissist. I mean, yeah, I don't like Homecoming, but I'm not going to. I'd rather like pull back the hate for the movie if I got praised by like the director. John Watts praised the movie, and like I may not like John Watts. I kind of find him a bit of a yes man compared to Sam Raimi and Mark Webb, but at least like I would rather show respect than try and continue being a dick. And now we're not going to see Spider-Man Lotus anymore, and like good riddance, as Symbiote Spidey would say in the third movie. But like, yeah, overall, let this be a reminder that regardless of your opinions on any Spider-Man movie, at least the original three actors aren't going to be in the same level of controversy, nor will they like be in anything as bad as what we got with those guys. Maybe they will be, but so far, neither Toby, nor Andrew, nor Tom are anything bad like what we saw with Gavin, and neither are the directors. Thank God. But that about wraps it up for the Spider-Man talk. Holy shit, what a lot to say about Spider-Man beyond just what we already like about him.
Yeah, Spider-Man has not only made our childhoods amazing, but definitely countless other people's childhoods. Whether you started from the 90s cartoon, the 60s cartoon, the Raimi, the trilogy, Amazing Spider-Man, MCU Spider-Man, or hell, like maybe even that one Disney Junior Kids show of Spidey and his amazing friends, featuring Miles Morales and Ghost Spider apparently, or
all the way back with Amazing Fantasy 15. Spider-Man is always a character that we look up to, because he's made for every kind of audience member, and he's also one that has an important moral that we must follow. But that's going to wrap it up today. I want to thank you for joining me today, Antonio. It's been great making a movie regarding stuff like this, and I kind of said movie, but hey, it's like nearly 3 hours long, maybe more than 3 hours, don't you think? Oh God.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it to be this long. Not that I didn't have any work, but at the same time, I was just wanting to do like a lot of talking about this character that we love very much, and so yeah.
And that wraps it up as mentioned already. Thank you all for watching this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. I want to thank you for making it all the way to the end. But until then, take care.
Goblin! You aren't getting away from me! I'm going to destroy you. Don't be so difficult, Spider-Man! You messed with the wrong guy. Let's dance. You think you can stop me? Stop being so difficult! No, it's getting away. Mary Jane!
Oh, Spider-Man. Get it, Tiger.
We should do this again sometime. I'm Spider-Man. Ooh! Now you're getting into the spirit of things. You must strike without mercy to win. Give me a break. Nothing like an innocent life in a balance to make things more interesting. I'm gonna stop your rampage right now.